Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 3rd, 2020, and we are live tonight. We hope everybody's doing well. We're broadcasting, should be on 910 AM Superstation's Facebook fan page, and also we're on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. All right, well, look, we have a lot to talk about tonight. It's been a very, very busy week. We saw unemployment numbers come out this past Thursday, and we know that 3.8 million more Americans filed for unemployment insurance. So we'll talk some about that. And then also there's a new round of funding that is available for the as part of the CARES Act, okay, the coronavirus rescue package, and there's $60 billion that is going to small banks and credit unions and it's designed to be able to be accessible for African American owned businesses, Hispanic owned businesses, minority owned businesses, etc. Well, we're seeing that a lot of that money, just like in the previous bill, we're seeing that African American businesses are still having a hard time accessing these dollars. We're going to talk some about that. NBCnews.com has a really good article dealing with that, and how they're asking the question, why are so many African American owned small businesses shut out of the Paycheck Protection Program loans, Paycheck Protection program loans. Okay, so we'll deal with that. And then we also saw this past week that Derrick Johnson, who's the president of the NAACP, national chapter of the NAACP, he's demanding that the federal government do more to help African Americans, African American owned businesses, I should say. And I found it interesting, Donald Trump is not talking about the plight that African American owned businesses is having. After he talked all about what he was going to do for black people, he asked black people back in 2016, what the hell do you have to lose? And you've heard my show the past few weeks. I told you the correct answer is everything. What the hell do you have to lose? Everything. Your job, your house, your health insurance, your life, your family. The correct answer was everything. NAACP President Derrick Johnson demands federal government do more to help black businesses. So blackenterprise.com has an article about that. And once again, that's an example of how elections have consequences. And you heard me during 2016. This is what I was warning people of. Okay, so we saw this past week, there was reporting from let's see, who was this? Washington Post. Washington Post had a good article, and this was dealing with more missed opportunities, more missed signals, but it was dealing with how Donald Trump was not reading his presidential daily briefings. President's intelligence briefing book repeatedly cited virus threat. This is from April 27, 2020 by Greg Miller for Washington Post. Okay, and you know, once again, this is an example of incompetence, and this is an example of how elections have consequences, and how one of the qualities that are important in a president is a president who's competent, responsible, president who will read his or her daily briefings. Okay, looks like this time is going to be a man. Maybe next time it'll be a woman. And you're responsible for 330 plus million people. This is an example of what happens when you have a president who has a short attention span, a president who's declared war on the scientists, president who has broken up pandemic teams. So more information came out this past week dealing with missed opportunities and incompetence from the Trump administration, specifically Donald Trump. Read this article from the Washington Post. President's intelligent briefing book repeatedly cited virus threat. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Also this past week, Diddy, P. Diddy, Sean P. Diddy Combs, Puffy, whatever you want to call him, A few years ago, if his hip hop artist Shine had not taken the rap and said that was his gun, that was found in Diddy's limo in the secret compartment when J-Lo was in the limo, if Shine hadn't taken the rap, we'd be calling Diddy something else, beginning with a number and ending with a number. But that's a whole nother conversation. Okay. This past week, he was interviewed by Naomi Campbell on her, I think it's her YouTube show, and he made some statements. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because it's pretty idiotic, especially after African Americans went out in the primaries and voted for who they wanted to vote for, and then Diddy's going to jump in talking about he may hold the black vote hostage. Really? Okay. You better hope we don't hold you hostage. Not literally, but figuratively. Not literally, but figuratively. Okay. Dr. Christina Greer wrote a very, very good piece for thegrill.com. Maybe Diddy can afford not to vote for Biden. Black voters cannot. Maybe Diddy can afford not to vote for Biden. Black voters cannot, because Diddy's almost a billionaire. Okay, Diddy's almost a billionaire. So there's a lot of black billionaire nonsense talk. Because when Roland Martin did a very good deconstruction of this. I put that in my email newsletter that went out a couple of days ago. And also there was a fund that was announced this week that Diddy was launching. And let's see, Shop Black has an article about that. I'll try to pull that up. We may talk a little bit about that. But in the statement that Diddy made, I find it interesting that he did not talk about any of Donald Trump's destructive policies. Like, for instance, Donald Trump mishandling the global this coronavirus pandemic that's cost about 67,000 people their lives, and how African Americans disproportionately in many large cities make up a disproportionate amount of people who are dying. He didn't talk about the fact that you have now 4.5 million African Americans who are unemployed. 4.5 million unemployed in 6 weeks. At the time he made the statement, it was probably maybe about 3.5 million. Okay? He didn't talk about the fact that you have less African Americans with health care now than when President Obama left office, because Donald Trump's Attorney General, William Barr, is in court right now trying to repeal the entire Affordable Health Care Act. He didn't talk about how Trump has reversed almost 200 policies that the Obama administration had in place. Largely, these policies were beneficial to African Americans. The reversal of them is detrimental. He didn't mention any policies, nothing like that. So the whole argument, I just find it very, very interesting. Disturbing and interesting at the same time. If you go back and watch last week's broadcast, and it's on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, and we're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. We've got a jam-packed show for you tonight. Don't want to miss any of this. We have, how I used to say, we have a lot of information to cover, not a lot of time to do it in, and we have one moment to lose, right? Okay. So, Roland Martin on Roland Martin Unfiltered, we share his broadcast on our Facebook fan page each day, Monday through Friday. He deconstructed Diddy's argument, and everybody wants results and things like this, right? If you go back and watch the broadcast I did last week, in the last segment, it was about an hour and 15 minutes, I compared Mike Bloomberg's policies pertaining to the African American community to Bernie Sanders' policies to Joe Biden's policies. Okay? And I break this down, and we look at policies. We also look at, I also deal with history as well. Okay, and I give you a number of articles to reference dealing with history, dealing with law, dealing with the crime bill, all different types of things like this. Okay, so go watch that. So that came from some of that information came from the extensive article that TheRoot.com did, and it was written by Michael Harriot. And what they did was they put together a policy matrix, and they got policy experts together. They put together a team of policy experts, legal scholars, and political pundits, all of whom were African American, to help devise a policy matrix. And I said that's the first time I've ever seen anything like that done, right? So I cited some of the information they talked about in that document, and then dealt with a lot of history as well. At the time that this document came out, February 28th, 2020, Joe Biden did not have an African American platform or policies specifically targeting the African American community. Okay, and I checked his website because I looked at the websites of all the candidates. I checked his website in early March, and it was not there. I checked again this past week after I did last Sunday's show, and it's been updated. There's an African American platform. There's also a Hispanic platform as well. Okay, so check that out. None of these are endorsements, but I'm dealing with information. Okay, so check that out at joebiden.com. All right, and we talked about this last week. We looked at the different policies and broke them down and how they would impact the African American community. Okay, so go back and watch last week's show. All right, now also this past week we see more information has come out regarding the allegations against Joe Biden. There was a really good article. MSNBC has been doing some good coverage on this. There was a really good article that they have from May 2nd, 2020. Biden accuser Tara Reade, quote, not sure, end quote, what complaint she claims was filed with Senate. With Senate says. Biden accuser Tara Reade, not sure what complaint she claims was filed with Senate. Tara Reade has said the complaint, if it is found, would not include the sexual assault allegation she came forward with in March. Okay, we'll talk about this a little bit. Hey, look, I ain't gonna spend a whole lot of time on this. I'm telling you, they covered this on MSNBC. There's so many turns, changes in the stories, things like this. So we'll talk about this a little bit. I'm not gonna. I only have 2 hours here. I ain't gonna spend a whole lot of time on this, and I've got some other topics to deal with. All right, but she was supposed to do an interview on Sunday on Fox News. That was canceled due to security concerns, and she's trying to get the security team together and things like this. Okay, but there's some elements of the story that have changed from when she originally came out. I think it was March of 2019, and said made allegations of sexual harassment. Then this year it changes to sexual assault. So okay, all right. I'm just sitting back watching this and say, okay. So we'll deal a little bit with that. But a couple weeks ago, I talked about the miniseries on Netflix, Self-Made, that's inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. Okay, now once again, all the historical purists, most of them are not historians, all the historical purists, and say, oh, the same thing with Harry, right? They made up characters, and this is wrong, and Comcast this and all this. Now the other movies from subsidiaries of Comcast, things like this that have come out since then, you see they haven't said nothing about that, right? Just notice that, okay? Just notice that the other okay, we got to go to commercial break. Sorry, are we on commercial break already? JT, are we on commercial break? We're at the 17. JT, you there? Hold on. We're broadcasting on 9:10 AM the Superstation WFDF. Are we on commercial break? Seems a little early for the break. JT, let me know. Let me see. Maybe you can't hear me. I don't think we're on commercial break yet. But anyway, what I said was going to happen when all these people putting out stuff attacking the movie Harriet, and not really focusing on the history and how to teach history to our people. Now that being that people were going to see the movie, how do we take this to the next level and really teach our people the real history of Harriet. The interview. You saw the interview I did with historian Jamon Jordan, fellow historian Jamon Jordan. Okay, and shout out to Jamon because he lost his mother to coronavirus. I talked to him briefly in the past couple of weeks here. So, Self-Made is very interesting. It's a 4-part series. It's inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker, and it's loosely based on the book. It's inspired by the book On Her Own Ground, which was written by A'Lelia Bundles. A'Lelia Bundles is the great-great-granddaughter of Madam C.J. Walker. I've talked to A'Lelia. We're Facebook friends, so I've talked to her a couple of times in the past because I've dealt with Madam C.J. Walker in my lecture series, Great African Women in History, The Mothers of Civilization. I'm going to reach out to A'Lelia to set up an interview with her as well. But I finally, this past week, I finally watched all 4 installments of Self-Made. So we're going to talk about that in the second hour. I took like 4 pages of notes on this. That's how, when I watch movies like that, okay, that's how I do that. I take notes, okay, because I'm a historian and I'm a teacher. So that's what I do. All right, we're coming up on a break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 3rd, 2020. We'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so, hey, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Okay, SageandElmApothecary.com offers unique products for people who live a plant-based life or want to support a plant-based company. SageandElmApothecary.com has over 60 different beautifully handcrafted soaps, natural toothpaste, hydrating oils, deodorants, face masks, shampoos, conditioners, and so much more. Visit their website, SageandElmApothecary.com, APOTHECARY.com, to order their products, find out about upcoming events and pop-up shops. Also, use the promo code AHNSpring20, AHNSpring20, to get 20% off your order. Okay, and let them know you found out about this from the African History Network. Okay, so even though people aren't traveling right now, you know you will be traveling soon, and you want to buy travel accessories. BlackLionLeather.com is a very unique African-American owned company because they offer unique leather travel accessories. They manufacture and sell online to the culturally inspired African-American traveler. Their tagline is "Carry Your Culture, Carry Your Culture." They are 100% African-American owned and operated. Visit their website today, BlackLionLeather.com, BlackLionLeather.com, and carry your culture with you. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation of Future Radio. Yeah, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 3rd, 2020, and we are live. We're broadcasting on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF, and also our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and we should be on 9:10 a.m. Superstation's Facebook page also. You know, usually on Sundays I'm in the studios of 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, but because of the stay-at-home order from Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who you've seen on national TV a lot, the hosts are broadcasting from home. Okay, and with me, I have a studio in my home already because I used to do national syndicated radio and broadcast from home. So this works out pretty well for me. I'm just saying, you know, this works out pretty well for me. Okay, all right. So the calling number is 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 if you have a question or comment. Let me do, let's see here, we're going to get into an update on what's going on with coronavirus. But first, on the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the show. We deal with current events and history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word KEMET, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word KEMET, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, right on the homepage, and you can sign up for the email newsletter there as well. Okay, normally I would tell you where I'm going to be speaking, in the next month or so, but hell if I know. Everything's been canceled. I had a whole schedule for the entire year set up. Don't know what's going on with that now. All right, but Queen Thais from the Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo, she did contact me this past week. I need to call her back. I was supposed to call her back. We know that I think it's the 9th annual Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo is coming up third weekend in July, I think it is, but it's all going to be online. So you'll hear more about that. But a lot of this other stuff that's planned, I don't know what's happening with that. Okay, we'll have to find out, right? And then we see that a lot of states that have Republican governors are opening up very quickly. And I think that's going to backfire on them as well, okay? We're going to see what happens with that. All right, so nearly half of the U.S. will reopen in some form beginning this coming week. About a dozen states tentatively returned to public life this past Friday, the first mass reopening of businesses since the coronavirus pandemic brought America to a standstill 6 weeks ago. Now, more restrictions are expected to loosen this coming Monday, which will be Monday, May 5th. At the same time, portions of the country, including much of the West Coast and the Northeast, remain shuttered, causing clashes over how, when, and whether to reopen these various states. Protesters gathered in the capitals of Kentucky, Oregon, and Florida following other demonstrations this past week in Illinois, California, and Michigan. Okay, now, NBCnews.com has a really good piece dealing with the states that are reopening. Okay, now many of you saw what took place in the state of Michigan, in the capital, Lansing, Michigan. This past week, you had hundreds of protesters up there with guns. They didn't have like Glocks. I mean, they didn't have like 40 caliber Glocks. They're out there with assault rifles. Most of these white men, well, let's just be honest, right? This is some of the dumbest ass stuff I've ever seen, okay? But Governor Gretchen Whitmer is trying to save lives. You're going to take your ignorant behind out there with your gun. Why are you taking your gun out there? They storm the Capitol, go inside the building, the Capitol building. Now, you know what would happen if they were black, right? First of all, they wouldn't even let them on premises if they were black. I mean, let's just be honest. Then a lot of them weren't wearing face masks. A lot of them weren't wearing facial coverings. Okay? Some of the ones that were probably trying to hide their identity. Okay? I wonder if some of them are going to lose their jobs behind this. Yeah, you protesting. Why are you out there with guns? Why are you intimidating elected officials? What do you think had happened if black men were on the Capitol grounds trying to intimidate elected officials? So this is white privilege. This is a combination of white privilege and gross stupidity. Because some of these geniuses are going to get coronavirus. And for some of them, it ain't going to turn out too well for them. I'm just telling you right now, that's what's going to happen. A lot of these guys look like they don't even wash their hands when they go to the bathroom. So some of them, it ain't going to turn out too well for them. Okay? And I told you so. Hey. You shouldn't take your ass up there in the first place. Detroit Free Press reported, May 1st, 2020. Whitmer orders Michigan theaters, bars to remain closed until May 28th. Whitmer orders Michigan theaters, bars to remain closed until May 28th. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, has ordered theaters, restaurants, bars, casinos, gyms, and other places of accommodation to remain shuttered until May 28th amid the novel coronavirus pandemic. They remain limited to carry out and delivery orders only. They remain limited to carry out and delivery orders only. The order also continues the closure through May 28, 2020 of all non-essential personal care services that require individuals to be within 6 feet of each other, including hair and nail salons, barbershops, and tanning, massage, spa, tattoo, and piercing services. The order does not apply to personal services that are medically necessary. The executive order issued this past Thursday extends the executive order issued Thursday extends one set to expire, and came as the governor also extended a state of emergency without approval from the Republican-controlled legislature. The state of emergency was set to expire Thursday night. Now, Governor Gretchen Whitmer and the legislature are at war over her legal authority to now enforce emergency orders. The legislature plans to take the governor to court, okay? They took her to court. The court ruled in her favor also, by the way. Okay, protesters, some armed, also expressed their opposition to the state of emergency Thursday at the state capitol. Let's see, Detroit Free Press has an article dealing with that as well. We'll pull it up. Capitol protesters urge an end to Michigan's state of emergency. Capitol protesters urge an end to Michigan's state of emergency. And what Governor Gretchen Whitmer said when these geniuses were out there the week before, and they're doing this now, your actions like that, because some of these fools are going to get coronavirus. They're going to be asymptomatic, take it to their grandparents, something like that, and kill them, right? Your actions could very well cause an extension of the state of emergency, an extension of the stay-at-home order, because it will lead to a rise in the spread of coronavirus. And I'm still trying to figure out why you're all out there with guns. This wasn't a Second Amendment rally. And then genius, dumbass Donald Trump, he's encouraging them. He tweeted, "Liberate Michigan." He's encouraging them. Now, all the black people that say elections don't matter who you vote for, things like this, right? When have you seen a sitting president encourage people to do nonsense like this? When have you seen a sitting president to encourage? I'm not talking about like Woodrow Wilson in 1914 or 1915. I'm talking, like in recent history. When have you seen a sitting president? That's irresponsible. What do you think will happen if Donald Trump gets reelected to the second term? What will he encourage these geniuses to do then? 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Read this article from the Detroit Free Press. Freep.com is the official website of the Detroit Free Press. Capitol protesters urge an end to Michigan's state of emergency. Now, also, I saw people posting pictures, the African-American women standing outside of hair supply stores, and they're saying, oh, why are they going? They should be at home, things like this. It's not an emergency. Look, some people may not like me saying this, but have you seen some of these sisters' hair? Maybe it is an emergency. I'm just saying. Okay, if you're wearing, if you wear, you want to wear a mask and, things like that and be 6 feet apart or more, what have you. I'm not going to beat up on them. Now, if you're trying to buy blonde wigs and all this stuff, then, we need to have a conversation. But if you're trying to do maintenance, because there are problems that can occur when you don't properly take care of your hair, right? Health problems that can occur when you don't properly take care of your hair. So if you're trying to, If you're trying to get a 60-inch weave, well, that's different. I'm not talking about that. But if you're trying to get basic products to maintain your hair, to have healthy hair, etc. If you stand out there with no mask, because see, in the state of Michigan, based upon Governor Gretchen Whitmer's executive order, when you go into public spaces like that, enclosed spaces, stores, grocery stores, etc., everybody has to have a mask. Okay, wear a mask, not just have one. Actually wear it covering your mouth and your nose, not wear it underneath your chin. Okay, so, I'm not beating up on sisters trying to do basic care like that. I'm not beating up on that. I'm beating up on them for that. Okay, so all right. Let's see what people are saying on Facebook. Follow me on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. Right? I can't wait to go back to the barber because I'm tired of cutting my own hair. I save money, but so what? I can't fade my own hair, right? So I just cut it all off. All right, so we've got Erica, we've got Greg Osborne, we have Lakeisha on Facebook. They're laughing at what I said. On YouTube, we've got Fly Girl and YHM and who's this? Jamaican Angel and Cosmically Made. Just a few of the people watching on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms as well. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay. All right. So let me go back to some updates because we only have 2 hours here on 910 AM Superstation. 25 minutes are already gone. Okay. So all right. So we see cities, we see states opening back up, especially states that have Republican governors, and a lot of this is going to be premature. A lot of this is going to cause the spread of coronavirus to spread even more, okay? And Donald Trump is really trying to open back up the country because each week more and more devastating news comes out, and he's trying to win a re-election. This is what this is about. This is putting profit over people. This is putting his presidency over the safety of people. That's what this is about. So we see that protesters gathered in the capitals of Kentucky, Oregon, and Florida, following other demonstrations this week in Illinois, California, Michigan. NBCnews.com has a list of the states that have opened and the ones that are still shut down. The name of that article, because we have it pulled up here, what is that? Reopening America. Some states are starting to reopen and lift lockdowns, even as the battle against the coronavirus rages on. Reopening America. Some states are starting to reopen and lift lockdowns, even as the battle against the coronavirus rages on. It's been 6 weeks since the first stay-at-home orders were announced in the United States amid the coronavirus pandemic that has ravaged the country, with more than 1 million known cases and more than 60,000 deaths. And we'll give you the official count here from Johns Hopkins University in just a minute also. I'll pull that up. Nearly 2 months since the social distancing measures began, certain states are slowly starting to reopen their economies. Now, a lot of these Republican states that are trying to reopen, like the state of Georgia under Brian Kemp, who stole the election from Stacey Abrams, right? A lot of these Republican states do not meet the guidelines from the White House stating that you have to have 14 days of declining cases of coronavirus, but they're opening up anyway. And as of this week, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp allowed some non-essential businesses to reopen, including restaurants, gyms, nail salons, and movie theaters. Now, this past weekend on MSNBC, especially on Reverend Al Sharpton's show, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms talked about how she was really upset with Brian Kemp, Governor Kemp, over reopening the state, and she's talked about how that's going to jeopardize the lives of African Americans and Hispanics. Black people, stay at home. as much as possible. I understand going to the grocery store, things like that. Don't go to the movie theater. Don't go to the gym. All this stuff. If you go to the restaurant, do carry out. This stuff right here. And there was a good segment on Politics Nation on Sunday. Reverend Al Sharpton's show on MSNBC. He has Alina Maxwell on, and this other sister, Erin Haynes. Erin Haynes wrote this article, and I made a note of it, as I do a lot of articles, because I'm going to, it's from the Washington Post, and I'm going to read it. The name of this article is Black Activists and Officials See a Major Threat in South's Plan to Reopen. I'm going to pull this up here, because I didn't get a chance to pull it up before the show. And her name is Erin Haynes, I think it is. But this deals with how, back in March, I talked about how African Americans and Hispanics are often deemed as essential workers in various capacities, whether it's working for delivery services like FedEx, whether it's working in grocery stores, etc. So even in the midst of a shutdown, they are working for essential businesses. And then we just saw also this week that Donald Trump, using the Defense Production Act, is forcing meat producers, meat packing plants, to stay open. And this jeopardizes the lives of African Americans and others, because there has been a huge outbreak in these meat packing plants of people being diagnosed with coronavirus. Okay? And so when you reopen prematurely, a lot of these businesses are businesses where African Americans work. And what we're seeing, and as I reported last week, and Vice.com had an article dealing with this, many states, the governors are saying, if your place of work, if you are getting unemployment right now, you filed for unemployment in the last 6 weeks, you're getting unemployment right now. If your job reopens, if you don't go back to your job, because say you fear for your life, because you fear for coronavirus, things like this, if you don't go back to your job, okay, you're not going to be eligible for unemployment anymore, because they're offering your job back. You don't want to go back because you say, well, wait a second, we had 5 people who died from coronavirus at the workplace. We had 10, 15 people who caught coronavirus. I don't want to go back because I think I'm going to be next. So all this is coming together when we deal with opening these states too soon, because people want to focus on profit over people. Black activists and officials see a major threat in South's plan to reopen. This is by Erin Haynes, E-R-R-I-N, Erin Haynes, H-A-I-N-E-S. She wrote this for WashingtonPost.com. This is from April 28th, 2020. As Southern governors, and JT, let me know if you have any callers. As Southern governors are reopening the region this week, black activists are joining with local and federal lawmakers to sound the alarm about what they see as a looming threat to the black belt. They say the mostly white male Republicans who were reluctant to close their states but are now eager to reopen are effectively issuing a, quote, death sentence, end quote, for millions of African Americans who have been disproportionately impacted both economically and medically by the novel coronavirus. Black Voters Matter co-founder Latasha Brown, and Latasha Brown has been interviewed numerous times by Roland Martin on Roland Martin Unfiltered. She's doing a lot of good work, her and her group Black Voters Matter. She said, quote, he's willing to risk us at any cost, end quote. He's willing to risk us at any cost, end quote. Referring to Georgia Governor Bryan stole the election from Stacey Abrams Kemp. who announced a reopening of the state beginning this past Friday, with plans to officially let the state's stay-at-home order expire on Thursday. She said, quote, "It's clear that he doesn't give a expletive starting with a D about the citizens of this state, and that he feels like some folks are disposable. The first thing that came to my mind was these people are trying to kill us," end quote, said Latasha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter. She's an Alabama native who now lives in Georgia. Now, public health officials have said reopening states to commerce and freer movement comes with risks, particularly without robust testing and contact tracing. There's still a lack of tests. I know Donald Trump said over a month ago anybody who wants a test and get a test. That's not true. Now, probably if you Sean P. Diddy Combs, right? If he wanted a test and didn't have any symptoms, he and everybody at Bad Boy Records could probably get a test. But we saw a sister that worked for a hospital here in Detroit. She was African American. She had symptoms. She tried to get a test 4 times, couldn't get a test, and ended up dying of COVID-19. So a coalition of mostly African American female activists led by Black Voters Matter, the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative, the A. Philip Randolph Institute, and the Highlander Research and Education Center launched a petition to the governors of Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, and Florida, pleading with them to extend their stay-at-home orders. Reopening now, quote, especially for cash-poor communities and communities of color, is irresponsible and a death sentence for many of us, end quote, they wrote. This is why you hear me talk about the importance of not just the presidential race and Congress, but also state legislature and the governor. Because the governors have a lot of power. This is why you have to have a governor who exhibits good, who makes good decisions, who uses good judgment, who looks at the science, who will not ignore the pleas of people in a city like, oh, let's pick any city randomly. Let's say like Flint, Michigan, who say this water smells funny. And their pleas are largely ignored, especially by the governor at the time, Governor Snyder. They are responsible for people's lives. So a coalition of mostly African American female activists led by Black Voters Matter, the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative, the A. Philip Randolph Institute, and the Highlander Research and Education Center launched a petition to the governors of Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, and Florida. These were all pretty much former Confederate states also, just to, may not have anything to do with it that all these states had a history of slavery and, sided with the South and committed treason against the Union and took up arms to maintain slavery because it was essential to their way of life. That may not have nothing to do with any of this, but hey, I just throw that in there. So reopening now, quote, especially for cash-poor communities and communities of color, is irresponsible and a death sentence for many of us, end quote, they wrote. Now, the groups are also calling on the states to create safety plans for essential workers who are disproportionately, their word, minorities and females, specifically African Americans and also Hispanics. Before reopening, they want the groups are calling on these states to create a safety plan for essential workers before reopening. And they also want the states to report coronavirus data by race and county to increase unemployment support and to expand Medicaid. Okay. The petition reads, quote, our neighbors, relatives, members of our faith communities and co-workers are being put in an impossible position that prioritizes profit over people, end quote, the petition reads. Now, despite being only 13% of the U.S. population, really about 14% of the U.S. population, African Americans make up 30% of the deaths from the pandemic nationwide. Okay? 30% of the deaths from the pandemic. Now, also keep in mind, right? Thanks to Donald Trump and Republicans, less African Americans have health insurance today than they did when President Obama left the White House. You know, thanks to, Donald Trump. Because they have been taking away the subsidies for the Affordable Health Care Act. And Republicans have been trying to repeal the Affordable Health Care Act going back at least probably 7 or 8 years, something like that. And the U.S. Supreme Court is going to take up the case after the November 3rd, 2020 election. Because Donald Trump's Department of Justice is trying to repeal the entire Affordable Health Care Act, including pre-existing conditions. What the hell do you have to lose? And the Affordable Health Care Act gave health care to 3 million non-elderly African Americans who did not already have health care. So the crisis is not only one of public health, but also of economics, as African American unemployment is historically at least double that of whites, and minorities work the majority of low-wage, frontline jobs and are the least likely to be able to work from home. So about 33% of Americans can work from home. And let's see here. Back in March, I talked about this. Coronavirus to impact low-wage black workers the most. Finance.yahoo.com had this reporting. This is from March 12, 2020. I've been studying coronavirus since the end of January. So while people were talking about, Oprah and Gayle and Jada Pinkett Smith and Snoop Dogg and Kobe, and Jada said that what Snoop said about what Gayle said to Lisa Leslie about what Kobe did, all that stuff. I was studying coronavirus going back to the end of January. So only a third of the workforce in the country is able to work from home, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS. Go to bls.gov. This is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is the Labor Department. Nationwide, more than 32 million workers don't have access to paid sick leave. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 92% of higher wage earners received paid sick time compared to their lower income counterparts. Only 31% of workers with salaries in the bottom 10% have this benefit. Now, let's see here. Only 48% of workers in the leisure and hospitality industry have access to paid sick leave. Only 31% of workers with salaries in the bottom 10% have paid sick leave. I'm trying to see, did they break this down by race? Among the working poor, African American workers will be harmed the most. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, African American and Hispanic workers are more than twice as likely to earn poverty level wages compared to their white counterparts. Roughly 8% of African American and Hispanic workers earn wages below poverty level compared to just 4% of white workers. Okay, so read this entire article. This is from finance.yahoo.com. Finance.yahoo.com. This is from March 12th, 2020. Coronavirus to impact low-wage black workers the most. Then blackenterprise.com also has an article from March 13th, 2020. The coronavirus will hit low-wage black workers the hardest. Let's see. Okay. Let me know how much time we have before the break, JT. Five minutes before the break. Okay, do we have any callers? Okay. Okay, phone line's been on and off all day. Calling number is area code 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, and hopefully you can get through. If you can't get through, post your comments here on social media. We'll try to get them addressed also. Okay. All right. So check out that article from finance.yahoo.com. Also look at this extensive article here from the Washington Post by Aaron Haynes for the Washington Post. Let's go back to it a little more. Despite only being 14% of the U.S. population, African Americans make up 30% of the deaths from the coronavirus pandemic. The crisis is not only one of public health, but also of economics, as African American unemployment is historically at least double that of whites and minorities. And minorities work the majority of low-wage frontline jobs and are the least likely to be able to work from home. The states of Florida, Alabama, and Tennessee are also set to lift their stay-at-home orders on Thursday. Mississippi began its reopening process this past Monday. North Carolina's order was set to expire on April 29th, but Democratic Governor Roy Cooper extended the state's order until May 8th. Louisiana's Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards on Monday extended the state's stay-at-home order from Thursday to May 15th. We know also Governor Gretchen Whitmer has extended the state of emergency here in the state of Michigan to May 28th. Okay, read the article from Freep.com. Detroit Free Press. Whitmer orders Michigan theaters, bars to remain closed until May 28th. It gives more information in there also. Okay. All right, so Donald Trump met with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis at the White House this past Tuesday, where the two discussed their respective responses to the crisis. Governor Ron DeSantis, who was one of the last governors to issue a stay-at-home order, defended his approach as tailored and measured. Now, keep in mind, if Andrew Gillum had become the governor of Florida, it would have been a different story. And he would have been much more responsible in the way he handled this. He would have closed the beaches also. So DeSantis has not provided details on how he plans to proceed. Now, southern states were among the last to issue stay-at-home orders, with most shuttering the first week of April, days after much of the country closed schools, businesses, churches, and public spaces. Nearly 6 in 10 African Americans live in the South, the largest region in the country and home to half of the 10 most populous states for African Americans. Let me repeat this, because see, this is once again an example of how elections have consequences and how the decisions that elected officials make impact the lives of everybody, but especially African Americans. Nearly 6 in 10 African Americans live in the South, the largest region in the country and home to half of the 10 most populous states of African Americans: Florida, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia. Florida, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia. I think they were all former Confederate states also. 3 of the 4 cities with the highest percentage of African Americans are Southern, including Jackson, Mississippi, Miami Gardens, Florida, and Birmingham, Alabama, where nearly 80% of all residents are African American. Some Southern governors have continued to stick to their decisions, including Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, who just a couple weeks ago said he just found out that you could be asymptomatic and not have, you can have coronavirus, not exhibit symptoms, but infect other people. He said that was a game changer. He said he just found that out last 24 hours. This is about 2 weeks ago. The Center for Disease Control is down the street from his office, but he didn't know that. Okay, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. You expect us to believe that. All right, whatever. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, guys, we're on commercial break. We'll be back in a few minutes. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. We got Kim. On Facebook, we've got Kim Robinson. We've got Donna, Mark, Cliff. How's everybody doing? And then on YouTube, we've got got a bunch of people on YouTube. Everybody share this on YouTube. We've got Corey, Baba, Antonio, Fly Girl, Ronald, Naki, YHM, Dr. B Buccaneer, just a few of the people on Facebook. Hey, if you like this type of information, also you could donate to the African History Network. PayPal.me/the-AHN-show, PayPal.me/the-AHN-show through PayPal, or through Cash App, $the-AHN-show through Cash App, $the-AHN-show through Cash App. That helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, finance our Sunday night show, etc. Okay? All right. Let's see. We'll be back from break in a couple minutes here. Okay, how you doing, SB? SB on Facebook, Fern on Facebook also. So I guess beginning of June, I'll be back in the studios at 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. Okay, African American business owners, email us at customerservice@africanhistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. TheProfitRoom.com. TheProfitRoom.com offer is a stock market trading and education company. They have mentorship programs that are designed for beginners. They teach individuals just like yourself how to create generational wealth through trading and investing in the financial markets. They can teach you about stocks, options, futures, foreign exchange market. Their specialty is day trading and providing one-on-one mentorship. They have a class starting up very soon also. Visit their website, theprofitroom.com, theprofitroom.com, for more information. Now, a lot of people are want to get into shape. Spring is here. The weather's getting nicer. People have been quarantined. They've been gaining weight. Their children have been gaining weight, going back and forth to the refrigerator, and you want to work out. Well, SheRanHerselfFit.com. SheRanHerselfFit.com can help you with that. Their mission is to inspire and motivate women to make healthy lifestyle choices. She Ran Herself Fit is a brand that promotes women living a healthy lifestyle. Now, the founder of She Ran Herself Fit, her name is Felicia. Felicia lost over 200 pounds by changing her diet and running. Running may not be your inspiration, but find out what is yours. Visit SheRanHerselfFit.com right now for workout apparel that you can purchase at SheRanHerselfFit.com. Okay, coming back from the break. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation, the Future Radio. We're already in our second hour. This time goes back quickly. By quickly here. So I guess in the beginning of June, if Governor Gretchen Whitmer removes the stay-at-home order, I guess I'll be back in the studios at 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. Beginning of June, we'll see. But in the meantime, I'll be right here in the studio, so you see me throughout the week here. This works out fine for me. I already have the equipment here. Got 2 laptops. Just bought a new mixer, so this works out better. So this is fine for me. But hey, I like being in the studio also. Okay, so right before the break, we're giving an update of what's going on with coronavirus as well. And I was talking about this excellent article from the Washington Post, written by Aaron Haynes, Haines, Aaron Haynes for the Washington Post. Black activists and officials see a major threat in South's plans to reopen. Many African American leaders, we talked about this on last week's show, but many African American leaders, mayors, etc., who are in Republican states where these Republican governors are quickly opening back up. They were late to shut down the states and very quick to open back up the states. And many African American leaders, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, other African American mayors, activists, etc., are saying you're jeopardizing African Americans' lives and the lives of Hispanics as well, who are largely frontline workers when you do this. Okay, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms is telling people in Atlanta to stay home as much as possible. All right, so let's go back to this article for a few more minutes, and then I'm going to hit quickly some of these other topics, and then I want to get into the miniseries Self-Made on Netflix, okay? Because I finally watched it this past week. Inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. I took 4 pages of notes on this, so I'm going to go through, break this stuff down. You don't want to miss that. Okay, so despite being only 13% of the U.S. population, African Americans make up 30% of the deaths from coronavirus. The crisis is not only one of public health, but also of economics, as African American unemployment is historically at least double that of whites, and minorities work the majority of low-wage frontline jobs and are the least likely to be able to work from home. Let's see here. Okay, so nearly 6 in 10 African Americans live in the South, the largest region in the country and home to half of the 10 most populous states for African Americans: Florida, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia. 3 of the 4 cities with the highest percentage of African Americans are Southern, including Jackson, Mississippi, Miami Gardens, Florida, and Birmingham, Alabama, where nearly 80% of all residents are black. Nearly 80% of all residents are black. Now, some Southern governors have continued to stick to their decisions, including Governor Brian Kemp of the great state of Georgia, who clashed with Donald Trump after the president publicly admonished Brian Kemp for opening his state too early. The overwhelming majority of the country has not been tested for coronavirus. There's only about maybe 6 million people have been tested out of 330 million people. Okay? And this nonsense, no, we're not close to having 5 million people tested a day. This nonsense Donald Trump keeps putting out. He keeps trying to use happy talk to restart the economy. Okay? No, we ain't close to 5 million people per day being tested. The overwhelming majority of the country has not been tested for coronavirus, and the South appears to have among the lowest rates in the country. Without widespread testing, Americans, particularly the ones dying most from the disease, lack an accurate picture of the threat, said Camara Jones, C-A-M-A-R-A, Camara Jones, I should say, who's an epidemiologist and family physician whose work focuses on the impacts of racism on the nation's health. Camara Jones said, quote, we're blinding ourselves to how many infections there are, end quote. Now, African American lawmakers, including much of the Congressional Black Caucus and African American mayors in cities with large African American populations such as Atlanta, Jackson, Mississippi, Albany, Georgia, and New Orleans, have also been outspoken about the need for increased testing and economic support. Among the most vocal has been Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who has been active on social media and in interviews about urging residents of the capital of Georgia, which is Atlanta, to stay at home. Her stance drew racist backlash last week when Mayor Bottoms received an anonymous text calling her the N-word. They said they called her the N-word and said something like shut up and open back up Atlanta. She said, I was not elected mayor to be a coward. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms told the Washington Post during a virtual event on Tuesday. She said, quote, I don't think there's something larger at play. She said, I do think there's something larger at play. But the facts are the facts, and the data is the data. It is impacting African American communities at a higher rate. And Atlanta has a very diverse population with many of the underlying conditions we've talked about, end quote. So the activists are also working to hold regular community briefings to inform African Americans of the ongoing threat to the pandemic and to issue guidance for how they can protect themselves from the virus and find economic resources to help those unable to work during the crisis. Okay, so read the rest of this article because I don't have time to get through the rest of this. This is a good article here from Washington Post written by Aaron Haynes. Aaron Haynes is an editor-at-large for the 19th, covering the 2020 election. Name of this article once again, Black activists and officials see a major threat in South's plans to reopen. Okay, so check out that article. All right. Okay, let's move quickly here. Let's see. I was giving you an update on what's going on. When we look at Johns Hopkins University, we see that total confirmed cases of coronavirus worldwide, 3.5 million. We see that Donald Trump has made America number one. America's still number one. 1,157,000 cases. U.S. is far superior to anybody else. Closest one behind us is Spain, 217,000. You know, he said he's going to make America great again, and America's number one. When we look at total deaths worldwide, we see 247,000 deaths total worldwide. Also, when we look at testing, the total number tested in the U.S. is now at 7 million. Okay, it was 6 million, a little more than 6 million. Now it's at 7 million total tested in the U.S. When we look at deaths in the U.S., we know that the U.S. is now right at about 67,000 deaths. Yeah, a little more than 67,000 deaths. So a few days ago, Donald Trump was saying he was expecting 50,000 to 60,000 deaths, and what was he going to say when it hits 100,000? 80, 90, 100,000. What was he going to say then? And then also we see that the number of recovered in the U.S. is at a little more than 180,000 who have recovered in the U.S. Okay, so we have 1.1 million confirmed cases of coronavirus in the U.S. We see a little more than 180,000 have recovered, and then worldwide we're looking at a little more than 3.5 million reported cases worldwide, and about 1.1 million worldwide have recovered. I still see this discrepancy where worldwide we see maybe was about 30% have recovered worldwide, where in the U.S. it's a lot less than that. What we're looking at again, we're looking at 1.1 million, and so we're looking at maybe about 10% in the U.S. have recovered. Whereas worldwide we're looking at somewhere around 30%. Okay, all right. So let's continue here. We saw also this past week the unemployment numbers came out, and 3.8 million more people filed for unemployment. Two good articles dealing with this. WashingtonPost.com. 3.8 million Americans sought jobless benefits last week, extending pandemic's grip on the national workforce. Okay, 3.8 million Americans sought jobless benefits last week, extending pandemic's grip on the national workforce. So the outbreak and subsequent recession have wiped away all jobs created since the Great Recession. The economists estimate the national unemployment rate sits between 15 and 20%, compared to about 25% at the peak of the Great Depression. Now, this coming Friday, the job numbers come out. It's going to be horrific. Thursday, the numbers will come out about 8:30 a.m., which talk about the number of people who filed for unemployment the previous week. The first Friday of each month, okay, the job numbers come out from the Labor Department, which talk about the number of jobs created or the number of jobs in total lost. Okay, it's going to be horrific. We saw the when the April report came out for the month of March, 701,000 jobs were lost the previous month, ending 113 consecutive months of private sector job growth. 113 consecutive months of private sector job growth ended with the unstable genius. It started going back to 2010. Who was president in 2010? The black guy. 113 consecutive months of private sector job growth ended because of a mishandling of this pandemic, which led to an economic catastrophe. You go back and you look at Herbert Hoover, who was a one-term president, won the presidency in 1928. Herbert Hoover mishandled the Great Depression, which set it up for President Roosevelt to become president. Roosevelt was president for 4 terms. Herbert Hoover mishandled the economic disaster known as the Great Depression. So for comparison, 4.4 million people applied for benefits for the week ending April 18th, and 30.3 million people have sought benefits in the past 6 weeks alone. That figure represents roughly 1 in 5 American workers. There is no precedent for figures like this in modern American history. At first, national attention focused on the unprecedented wave of layoffs tied to restaurants and other non-essential businesses, said Tara Sinclair, an economist at George Washington University and senior fellow of the Indeed hiring lab. But it quickly became clear that many more industries were going to be hit by the downturn, even in the midst of a global pandemic. Tara Sinclair pointed to recent job losses in the healthcare industry, as surgeries and other elective procedures are canceled in large numbers. So the past couple of weeks, I've been talking about the reporting from the Washington Post going back to April 9th, which talked about how because many hospitals, like hospitals right here in Detroit, in Metro Detroit, have stopped doing elective surgeries. Elective surgeries generated a lot of money for the hospital. So because they have stopped doing elective surgeries, they're hurting for money. They're trying to get funding from the federal government as part of the various coronavirus packages. But now we're seeing layoffs at various hospitals here in Metro Detroit and across the country. We're seeing layoffs as well. So we see job losses in the healthcare industry as surgeries and other elective procedures are canceled in large numbers. Tara Sinclair said no job is safe. During normal times, a few 100,000 people might seek unemployment benefits on any given week, but millions of Americans have filed claims each week for more than a month. Millions of Americans have filed claims each week for more than a month. This is unprecedented in like modern times. This has overwhelmed state processing centers and expedited the debate in Washington about how to respond to the economic turmoil. Many Americans have stopped paying their rent and other bills, and economists are predicting any recovery will stretch well into 2020 and possibly beyond. During normal times, the economy will add a few million jobs each year. It could take many years for the economy to add back the 30 million jobs lost in the past 6 weeks. It took the past 6 weeks have wiped out the previous 10 years of job gains in 6 weeks. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. See, so this is what happens when you have an idiot in the White House. This is what happens when you have somebody who doesn't understand the economy. This is what happens when you have somebody who doesn't read their presidential daily briefings, don't look at the warning signs, declare war on the scientists. This is an example of what happens. So if we go and look at April 27, 2020, reporting from the Washington Post, President's Intelligent Briefing Book repeatedly cited virus threat. For weeks, the Presidential Daily Briefing, the PDB, as the report is known, traced the virus's spread around the globe, made clear that China was suppressing information about the contagion's transmittability and lethal toll, and raised the prospect of dire political and economic consequences. But the alarms appear to have failed to register with Donald Trump, who routinely skips reading the Presidential Daily Briefing and has at times shown little patience for even the oral summary he takes 2 or 3 times per week, according to officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss classified material. The advisories being relayed by... Now, what's interesting is, I think it was this past week, in one of the coronavirus daily briefings, Donald Trump was asked about this, about the presidential daily briefing. Did it mention coronavirus? Were you warned about coronavirus? He said he wasn't sure. He said he had to go back and review the information. You don't remember if you received warnings? He received multiple warnings in January and February in his presidential daily briefings. The reason why you don't remember because you didn't read them. We're coming up on a break here in a couple minutes. How much time we have before the break, JT? So the advisories, 3 minutes, the advisories being relayed by U.S. spy agencies were part of a broader collection of worrisome signals that came during a period now regarded by many public health officials and other experts as a squandered opportunity to contain the outbreak. A squandered opportunity to contain the outbreak. As of this past Monday, more than 55,000 people in the United States had died of COVID-19. Now it's 67,000. The frequency with which the coronavirus was mentioned in the presidential daily briefing has not been previously reported, and U.S. officials said it reflected a level of attention comparable to periods when analysis have been tracking active terrorism threats, overseas conflicts, or other rapidly developing security issues. A White House spokesman disputed the characterization that Trump was slow to respond to the virus threat. Quote, President Trump rose to fight the crisis head on by taking early, aggressive, historic action to protect the health, wealth, and well-being of the American people, end quote, said spokesman Hogan Gidley. Hogan Gidley. I don't know where the hell Hogan Gidley gonna find another job after this. He's just lost all respect and credibility, basically. Okay, to put nonsense out like this. I ain't even gonna read the rest of this BS from Hogan Gidley. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence is responsible for the presidential daily briefing. In response to questions about the repeated mentions of coronavirus, a DNI official said, quote, the detail of this is not true, end quote. The official declined to explain or elaborate. U.S. officials emphasized that the presidential daily briefing reference to the virus included comprehensive articles on aspects of the global outbreak, but also smaller digest items meant to keep Trump and senior administration officials updated on the course of the contagion. Versions of the presidential daily briefing are also shared with cabinet secretaries and other ranking U.S. officials. I think that includes Chair of the Senate Intelligence, or was it not Chair? Richard Burr. I think it includes Richard Burr also, Senator Richard Burr, Republican, who was at the Tar Heel Club in North Carolina, warning the people in the Tar Heel Club about the pandemic. And it's going to be on. He says it's going to be basically on the level like the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, while he was in public downplaying it. One official said that by mid to late January, the coronavirus was being mentioned more frequently, either as one of the report's core articles or in what is known as an executive update, and that it almost certainly called to Trump's attention, and that it was almost certainly called to Trump's attention orally. Read the rest of this article. This is from April 27, 2020. Washington Post. President's intelligent briefing book repeatedly cited virus threat. What we have here is a failure to communicate. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation Future Radio. When we come back, we'll talk about the miniseries Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. We'll be back in a few minutes. Okay. All right, guys, we're on commercial break. How's everybody doing? We got Kenneth, Cliff, Leah Wallace, Donna, just a few of the people watching on Facebook. Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also, okay? And then on New York police brutally racially mistreated the black guys because they wasn't practicing 6 feet. I missed that. Post an article or name of an article, Lady Ace. I may have seen something on social. Was it 2 officers that had one guy on the ground? I saw an article, something dealing with that. I'm not sure where it was though. Okay. All right. Okay, just a minute here. Let me get ready for this next segment. Okay, we'll talk about Joe Biden for a minute here. We'll give you this article. We'll talk a little bit about Diddy, and then I need to jump into, let's see here. We've got black businesses being shut out from, the Paycheck Protection Program. We'll talk a little bit about that. Then I'm going to get into self-made. We'll probably go past the 11 o'clock hour on social media. We'll lose 9:10 AM the Superstation at the top of the hour. And then we'll stay on my social media platforms here. Okay. Let's see where we're coming back from the break in just a minute here. Stand by, everybody. I had to get ready for this next segment. Welcome back to the African History Network show, right? Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 3rd, 2020. And we are live. The calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. Shout out to everybody who's watching on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. We have Alicia, and we have Erica, and Carolyn, and Cliff. Just a few people watching us. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. The African History Network on Facebook. That's my fan page, The African History Network. And then also on my personal page, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep on YouTube. Michael Imhotep, Imhotep on YouTube. Okay. All right. So in the first hour, we were talking about 30.3 million Americans have filed for unemployment in the past 6 weeks. We know this past week, 3.8 million more Americans filed for unemployment. Also, we talked some about, there was a good article from the Washington Post that dealt with how a lot of these states in the South that have Republican governors that are opening back up prematurely, they will be jeopardizing the lives of African Americans as well as Hispanics. Many African Americans and Hispanics are frontline workers. Washington Post has an article: Black activists and officials see a major threat in South's plans to reopen. Black activists and officials see a major threat in South's plans to reopen. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so we know the second round of the Paycheck Protection Program funding has been released. We know $60 billion has been set aside for minority and other undeserved borrowers, African Americans, Hispanics, etc., and women. Okay, their word minority, not mine. People jump in and say, "Oh, why you say minority?" That's what the article says. That's what it says. That's the language that's used, minority. Okay, we look at the reporting from NBCnews.com from April 29th, 2020. Why are so many black-owned small businesses shut out of the Paycheck Protection Program loans? So many African-American-owned small businesses are having trouble accessing the government's emergency Paycheck Protection Program loans, despite a fresh round of CARES Act funding that includes $60 billion in set-asides for minority and other undeserved borrowers. The coronavirus loan program, executed by the Small Business Administration, offers up to $10 million in loans per customer that can turn into grants that don't have to be repaid if certain rules are followed, such as using most of it for payroll plus rent and utilities. And I saw a number of articles this past week dealing with how African American owned businesses are having a hard time accessing these funds, especially the first round. Some with the second round, but the money from the second round just came out, so the verdict isn't completely in on that yet. So the program has been marred by administrative glitches and controversy since its hasty midnight launch on April 2nd. Funds effectively ran out in minutes as well-resourced companies, with the help of their bankers, muscled their way to the front, while mom-and-pop businesses were left wondering whether they even had a place in line. And Washington Post had an article from this past week that dealt with how corporations, big businesses ended up getting, publicly traded companies, things like that, they ended up getting, I forgot how much money they got. But they ended up getting, I think, something like $1 billion or $100 billion in money. I forgot the exact number. Let me see. I think I printed that article up. We'll see here. Let me see. Just we'll see. I thought I printed that one up here, but I'll try to find that article. I've got so many of them. Let me see something here just a second. But yeah, it dealt with how corporations, really the ones who the funds were not for, ended up getting a lot of that money. Okay, and I'll try to find an article and post the link here on the thread of the broadcast. All right, so let's see here. All right. So despite good intentions, the government's emergency relief program leaves many feeling left behind. African American business leaders say the small business program needs to do more to reach underserved borrowers. Now, Ron Busby is the president of the U.S. Black Chamber, the U.S. Black Chambers, Ron Busby. And the U.S. Black Chambers advocates for African American businesses and African American chambers of commerce. He said, quote, I hear a lot about making America great again. In order to have a great America, that there has to be a great Black America. In order to have a great America, there has to be a great Black America. In order to have that, we need great Black businesses. We need access to capital, Ron Busby said. Now, despite good intentions, the government's emergency relief program leaves many feeling left behind. While the new set-asides are one step, some program rules leave out a large number of community development funding institutions that could participate. The government maintains a searchable database of certified institutions. They have a link here for that. We'll post a link to this article from NBCnews.com. Okay. While the new set-asides are one step, some program rules leave out a large number of community development funding institutions that could participate. There also needs to be funding for training and education in how to apply for the programs. I agree with that. This is something else Ron Busby said. I agree with that. And one thing that African American chambers of commerce have to do across the country, I know some are doing this, okay? I think more needs to do this. This has to be one of the number one things they're focused on, is helping African American owned businesses have their paperwork in order so that they will have the paperwork, the tax returns, all the required paperwork reports to be able to apply for these funds, and then also help them through the process to be able to get these funds as well. So Baltimore cafe owner Terrence Dickinson is desperately calling everyone he knows for some kind of help with his relief applications. He's down to his last few $100s in the personal savings account he's been using to pay his staff. He has tried Bank of America, with which he has a business checking account, his personal bank, politicians who have used his cafe for campaign events, and even the Maryland Lieutenant Governor's office. He said, the financial industry has shown me no love for 20 years. The financial industry has shown me no love for 20 years, he said, of his challenges qualifying for traditional bank loans. But he feels this program should be different. Okay? He said it's our money. It's taxpayer money. That is true. It's a reallocation of taxpayer dollars. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. And those who are elected to office, and politics impacts every aspect of our lives. Therefore, those who are elected into office and those who are appointed to political office, right, pass laws and policies that impact every aspect of our lives. This is why in 2016, when you had people saying, we're not going to vote for president, we're just going to do economic empowerment and build 5-story buildings and invest in the stock market. I said, that's good, but politics and policies and laws shape the economy that your businesses operate within. Policies and laws regulate your business. So now we have governors who shut down your business. Elections have consequences. And when you see myself teach, or Professor James Small or Dr. Leonard Jeffries, we talk about the pyramid principle, and they're two of my teachers. The foundation of that pyramid is African history and culture. And it's African history and culture that influences the other two sides of the pyramid, your economic empowerment and political empowerment. They all work together. Last week when I talked about principles of political self-defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. And we talked about the policies of Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and Mike Bloomberg, as well as Donald Trump, because Donald Trump's policies are destroying African American owned businesses. Not to mention black people dying, but just destroying African American owned businesses. We go back and look at the 35-day partial government shutdown, how that was destructive to African American owned businesses, how it harmed African American farmers. All this, we look at the Department of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, who's the Secretary of Agriculture. Go look at the interviews that Roland Martin has done with John Wesley Boyd Jr. John Wesley Boyd Jr. heads up the Black Farmers Associations, the National Black Farmers Association. And he talks about how they have been mistreated by this Department of Agriculture. 45,000 African American farmers. All these policies impact our lives. They impact African American farmers. They shape the economy that African American owned businesses have to operate within. So a lot of these businesses are shut down. A lot of these African American businesses are not going to survive. A lot of these white businesses are not going to survive. If the white businesses are not going to survive, what do you think is going to happen to our businesses? At his Tara Cafe, T-E-R-R-A, Tara Cafe, a community-focused restaurant offering Southern comfort and soul food, along with an arts and event space, Terrence Dickinson has been trying to pivot with the times since the coronavirus pandemic took hold. He's increased delivery operations and tried to get the hang of Instagram and social media marketing, but sales has still plummeted. Now, I was over at the Turkey Grill today. I went to go see my man George over at the Turkey Grill. I saw an article, I think it was the Detroit Free Press. Google this Turkey Grill, the Turkey Grill. And it was dealing with how the owner, George, I forgot George's last name, but he's offering coronavirus testing to all of his employees because he was shut down for a couple of weeks. I went by and talked to him today. Hadn't seen George in about 20 years. And he told me that they had been shut down for a couple of weeks, but they opened back up. They're in Highland Park. A lot of people know about the Turkey Grill in Highland Park. But let me see. There was an article from Detroit Free Press or something that talked about this. That's what prompted me to stop by and see him, see how he's doing. But yeah, this is even African American restaurants that are still open. When you talk to the owners, and I have, dude, they're just doing a fraction of the business that they were doing because, for instance, so like here in the state of Michigan, as well as other states, they're only doing carryouts, okay? No in-restaurant dining, and that's reducing their revenue. But as he explained to me today, he said the bills don't stop coming. You still have the bills coming, but you have less revenue. Even when you shut down, you still have some bills coming in. Okay, so this is crazy. So my heart goes out to business owners, especially African American business owners, dealing with this. Okay, that was Detroit News that had that article. Detroit restaurant Turkey Grill testing. The Detroit eatery protects customers by testing all employees for COVID-19. Okay. This is from DetroitNews.com. from April 30th, 2020, written by Jasmine Barmore. Okay, one small business in Detroit is leading the way in testing the employees for coronavirus. The Turkey Grill has had all 17 of the workers at the restaurant tested. The restaurant was singled out by Mayor Mike Duggan as one frontline operation that is getting it right as the city tries to contain the outbreak and get back to some semblance of normal or normality. George Lyles, Lyles, owner of the restaurant at 8290 Woodward in the New Center District, was listening when Mayor Mike Duggan invited healthcare and restaurant workers to get tested for free at the Michigan State Fairgrounds, regardless if they had symptoms or not. Okay, so the owner of the to-go spot specializing in Mississippi and Louisiana cooking registered his business with the testing site. Okay, Lyles contacted the call center. They give in the article, they give the number for the call center, 313-230-0505, where a representative evaluated if the business was essential and verified that they are open. The Turkey Grill was then assigned an ID number for each employee to give when they got to the testing site. So I heard Mayor Duggan talk about this in his daily press conference, his daily coronavirus press conference. I heard him talk about this. So George Lyles said that within 48 hours, all his staff had been tested, including himself. He said none of his staff gave him pushback. All 17 tests came back negative. Okay. All right. So read the rest of this article. This is here, the Detroit News, and they have the number that you can call. I think they're still doing the testing. I remember Mayor Mike Duggan talking about the frontline businesses. Free coronavirus testing is being offered for like the grocery stores and things like this for the employees. Okay. So this is something that the city of Detroit is doing to combat coronavirus. Okay, also read the article from NBCnews.com. NBCnews.com. Why are so many black-owned small businesses shut out of PPP loans? Why are so many black-owned small businesses shut out of PPP loans, as Paycheck Protection Program loans? Okay, that's at NBCnews.com. Then Black Enterprise had a good article because we know the NAACP and NAACP, National Urban League, National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton. You can listen to Keeping It Real with Reverend Al Sharpton Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF in Detroit. Reverend Al Sharpton has been talking about a lot how African American owned businesses have largely been shut out of this money, of these loans. BlackEnterprise.com reported on April 29, 2020, NAACP President Derrick Johnson demands federal government do more to help black businesses. Since the spread of COVID-19, or the novel coronavirus, took over the globe, there has been a race in the medical community to find a vaccine and ultimately a cure for the disease. One scientist is coming forward claiming that he had, let's see, is this the right article here? Oh, you know what? It printed the wrong, okay, we'll get this up. Hold on. That's what happened. It printed the wrong article. That's what happened. Okay, we'll pull this up from Black Enterprise here in just a minute. Then let's see. Let me get to this other, because in the next hour we'll get to Madam C.J. Walker here. So those keep watching me on my social media platforms, because we're going to go into overtime on my social media platforms when we're done broadcasting on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. Let me give you this article here. I ain't going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Let's see, NBCnews.com. Let's see, Tara Reade, who's made accusations, whose story has changed some. Where is that article here? Just a second, I had it. Oh, okay. Dealing with Joe Biden. Let's look at this article. from NBC. I've seen a number of different reporting on this, a number of different interviews. So Joe Biden was interviewed this past Friday on Morning Joe. Categorically denied the charges, said it did not happen. Then he was also interviewed on Politics Nation, Reverend Al Sharpton. You can watch those interviews at msnbc.com. NBC News is reporting Biden accuser Tara Reade not sure what complaint she claims was filed with Senate. Okay, Tara Reade, a former staffer, accusing former Vice President Joe Biden of sexual assault. First it was sexual harassment, now sexual assault. Specified Saturday that she's quote unquote not sure what wording she might have used in the paper complaint. She says she filed with a Senate Personnel Office in 1993. She said, quote, I filed a complaint regarding sexual harassment and retaliation, but I am not sure what explicit words on that intake form until we see it again, end quote, she told NBC News in a text message on Saturday. Tara Reade has said the complaint, if it's found, would include the sexual assault allegation she came forward with in March. She told the Associated Press in an interview on Friday, quote, the main word I used, and I know I did not use sexual harassment, I used uncomfortable, and I remember retaliation, end quote. Now, former Vice President Joe Biden has insisted that no record exists, but nonetheless, he sent a letter Friday asking the Secretary of the Senate to, quote, take or direct whatever steps are necessary, end quote, to determine where any such personnel record would exist and to release to the public any documents it finds related to any allegation Tara Reade might have made. Quote, it is not true. I am saying unequivocally it never happened, and it didn't. Joe Biden said in an interview on MSNBC's Morning Joe with Mika Brzezinski, he said, quote, it never happened, end quote. Now, Joe Biden also reiterated his unequivocal denial Friday night at a virtual fundraiser with Obama administration veterans. Quote, your trust and faith has always meant a great deal to me, end quote, he said. So first, let me say unequivocally, this claim is simply not true. It did not happen, end quote. Let's see here. A number of former Obama administration and campaign officials have also defended Joe Biden, with some pointing out that no evidence of such allegations was uncovered as part of the rigorous vetting process Biden went through to be chosen as vice president for the ticket in 2008. David Axelrod wrote an article for CNN talking about this. There were 10 attorneys. That investigated Biden's background, his history, his bills, his votes, all that. Investigated his background. The 10 attorneys. And David Axelrod talked about in the article that he wrote for CNN how there was not even a hint of any type of allegations like this pertaining to Joe Biden. Now, William Jeffress, Jeffress, William Jeffress, one of the nearly dozen lawyers who served on the Obama campaign's vice presidential search team, told NBC News that the background check found no evidence of any complaints of any kind, either of sexual harassment, discrimination, or any other misconduct of any kind against Joe Biden, then a member of the U.S. Senate. Quote, we did not do a complete search of records from his office, end quote, William Jeffress added. Quote, if something had come up, we would have looked at the records. I do not recall and do not believe we reviewed his Senate records, end quote. Okay, but they reviewed his voting record, like the votes in the Senate, things like this. Okay, but the extensive background check that they did on him did not find anything like this at all. So we'll see what happens. So some people are saying, well, does this mean don't believe the women now when they come forward? Okay. Now, if you go back and listen to what I said when the allegations came out against Representative John Conyers, when the allegations came out against Senator Al Franken, when the allegations came out against even Republicans like, what's that dumbass's name, out of Texas, Blake Farenthold, that idiot. Oh my God. Regardless of who it was, I said in the U.S. Senate, in the U.S. House of Representatives, there is already a procedure in place. There's already a mechanism in place to do an investigation. So I said when you had these Democrats, especially these white female Democrats, like Senator, was it Kirsten Nielsen, who ran for president and didn't last too long out of New York. I said when you're putting pressure on people, especially men, this is mainly men who've been accused, when you're putting pressure on them to resign without this going through the process that already exists in the Senate and the House of Representatives, you're jumping the gun when you do this. You're trying to, I'm all for, I'm against sexual harassment against women, sexual assault, misconduct. I'm against all that. Okay? I'm against it. I'm against men doing it to women. I'm against women doing it to men also. But when it happens, when people talk about believe the women, usually, in general, especially those who are right thinking, what they're saying is you believe the women enough to do an investigation. Believe the women does not mean that you just fire the man because of allegations. No, you do an investigation. And you vet the claims. Then based upon the evidence that's collected, then you take a course of action. Okay? Excuse me. Then you take a course of action. But I said before, hold on, wait a second. Testing. Okay, yeah, we're on. Testing. Wait. That's mute. That's all. Testing 1, 2, 3. Y'all can still hear me on Facebook, right? Should be able to hear me. Let me see. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, but yeah. So you have to do that. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Okay, we should still be on. We'll make sure the mic's on. So when you look at believe the women in general, it's saying you take their claims serious enough to do an investigation. That doesn't mean fire the guy. That doesn't mean put pressure on him to quit his job because of allegations. No, there's a process already in place. There's a process already in place to do an investigation. So when people, like you had some Democrats putting pressure on Representative John Conyers of the 13th Congressional District here in Detroit to resign when allegations. So wait a second, there's already a process in place. Let the process play out. So regardless of who it was, whether it was Democrat, whether it was Republican, even if it was a female who was accused of something, I'm saying, wait a second, if there's a process already in place, let the process play out. And don't put pressure on people to resign from office, things like this. Senator Al, and what happened was there were some Democrats who came out later after Senator Al Franken resigned, and if I remember correctly, even right before he was about to resign, who started thinking and said, well, maybe we were premature in asking him to resign. You think? You jumped the gun. So that's the problem, even though I think there's some people in the Me Too movement who are dedicated and mean well, some of this stuff just goes too far. Let the process play out. The process is there for a reason. Let the process play out. Gather the evidence, vet the claims, etc. All right. Hold on. Wait a second. Wait. Okay, can y'all still hear me on Facebook? You should be able to. Testing 1, 2, 3. I think something's frozen on Facebook. Okay, we'll keep going. All right, so let's look at let's look at. I'll try to pull up this article from blackenterprise.com dealing with Derek Johnson from the NAACP. We have to deal with this next week. All right. TheGrill.com had a good article from Dr. Christina Greer dealing with Diddy. Okay, everybody check this out. We may talk about this some next week. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on Diddy because he was largely silent during the primaries. I know he had the panel with T.I. and Killer Mike, and I talked about that before. A lot of that was just nonsense. When you're going to deal with politics, get some like political science experts. Get some people with PhDs in like political science. Get a constitutional law expert. Have an attorney there. Have a historian on the panel. Okay, as opposed to a lot of celebrity-based nonsense. Let's see here. Testing 1 2 3. Okay, so we should still be on. All right, so let's continue. Let me try to pull this up from blackenterprise.com. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. How much time we have left, JT?
Yeah, 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. So those watching on, join me on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, because we're going to continue the discussion, and we'll deal with Self-Made by Madam C.J. Walker. We'll do inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. We'll deal with that on the in the third hour. There was a good article from Dr. Christina M. Greer from TheGrill.com. Maybe Diddy can afford not to vote for Biden. Black voters can't. This is from May 1st, 2020. Okay? And she said, now, Dr. Christina Greer, first of all, she's a very intelligent African-American woman. She's an associate professor at Fordham University. You see her a lot on MSNBC as a commentator on MSNBC. She's somebody who actually studies politics. Okay, just to make a distinction between her and Diddy. Okay, she's somebody who actually studies politics and understands politics. She's an associate professor at Fordham University. She's a political editor at the Griot. She's the author of Black Ethnics, Race, Immigration, and the Pursuit of the American Dream. And she's the co-host of the podcast FAQ NYC. You see her a lot on MSNBC. Okay, and she said, "I'm still reeling." Where is this? Hold on, let me scroll back up. Just a second here. She said, "I'm still reeling over the recent comments made by Sean Diddy Combs. Quote, the black vote is not going to be for free," end quote, Diddy said on Naomi Campbell's web series, No Filter with Naomi. Quote, "We want to know very clearly, just like Trump made it clear that he wanted to build a wall. There's only been maybe about a mile or two of that wall built that's like new. Okay? Just so we understand. Biden needs to make it clear that he's going to change the lives and quality of life for black and brown people," he added, "or else he can't get the vote. I will hold the vote hostage if I have to," end quote. Really? I can tell Diddy has not read anybody's policies. One, this is irresponsible. I can tell Diddy has not read any of Biden's policies, because if he understood how Trump has reversed about 200 policies from the Obama administration, including weakening the Affordable Health Care Act, including reversing initiatives when it comes to criminal justice reform, like, let's say, for instance, dealing with privatized prisons, because the Obama administration, August of 2016, stated that they were not going to renew federal contracts for privatized prisons, and Trump has reversed this. In the 2013 initiative, Smart on Crime, that was put in place by Attorney General Eric Holder was reversed by Trump's Attorney General, his first Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, which backed off of charging low-level nonviolent drug offenders with the longest, harshest sentences. Okay? So, Christina, I know we're out of time here on 910 AM the Superstation. Keep watching on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. People watch on social media. Stand by. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. Also, you can donate to the African History Network through Cash App, $ TheAHNShow, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, or PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow. Right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next week. Peace. Okay, so we're still here on my social media platforms. You only do 2 hours on 910 AM the Superstation WFDF. And also remember, all these broadcasts, we have them in audio podcast format also. Okay, they're in audio podcast format also. Visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and right on the homepage, click on Listen to Podcasts. And wherever you get your audio podcast from, search for the African History Network Show. We're on iTunes, CastBox, Acast, FM Player, TuneIn. We're on a number of different social media platforms. Okay, so she said that Dr. Christina Greer said, I agree with the with Diddy. Joe Biden and the Democrats cannot take the black vote for granted. However, Diddy then went on to state that he will, quote, hold the vote hostage if he had to, end quote. Sir, what does that even mean? How will you hold the vote hostage? How will you hold the black vote hostage when you encourage black people not to vote? She said, I shudder to think that is your strategy. If it is, let me count just some of the ways that would be detrimental not only to the black community, but the nation and world for generations to come. Okay? And let me see here. Let me bring this. All right. All right, so we should be back for part 2 of the African History Network show. I was broadcasting and it froze up on me on Zoom, so we're back. We did the first 2 hours on 910 AM the Superstation WFDF in Detroit, and this last hour we're doing here on my social media platforms. So we should be back. So everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. Hope everybody's doing well once again. Okay, so when the broadcast froze up on me, I was talking about the article from thegrio.com that Dr. Christina Greer wrote dealing with Diddy's comments about holding the African American vote hostage. And let's see, we should be okay. We're on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. The African History Network. We're on my personal page, Michael Imhotep, on YouTube as well. Okay, so all right, how's everybody doing? Let's see here. Okay, so yeah, we're coming through. Okay, so let's go to this article, and then I also found the one from blackenterprise.com as well, dealing with comments from President Derrick Johnson. NAACP President Derrick Johnson demands federal government do more to help black businesses. Okay, so I'm going to finish up with this article here. Dr. Christina Greer responded to Diddy. We'll talk about the piece from blackenterprise.com dealing with NAACP President Derrick Johnson saying that the federal government needs to do more to help African American owned businesses. Then I'm going to get into the miniseries Self-Made that's on Netflix, that's inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. I finally watched the whole thing, went through and watched it twice actually. So I took about 4 pages of notes. So I'm going to break this down and give some of my commentary on the miniseries. Okay. So let's go back to this article. This is entitled, this is from thegrio.com. Maybe Diddy can afford not to vote for Biden. Black voters can't. Maybe Diddy can afford not to vote for Biden. Black voters can't. This is from May 1st, 2020. Dr. Christina Greer, who is the political editor for thegrio.com. She is an associate professor at Fordham University, PhD, and political editor at thegrio.com as well. And you see her a lot on MSNBC. Okay, so also go back and watch the broadcast that I did last Sunday. That was the April 26th show, because I broke down Bernie Sanders' policies compared to Joe Biden's policies in the African American community, and we looked at the policy matrix that theroot.com laid out. They put together a team of policy experts, legal scholars, and political pundits, all who are African American, to put together a 10-point policy matrix to evaluate the platforms of the Democratic candidates pertaining to the African American community. We know Joe Biden got a score of 72 out of 100. Bernie Sanders got a 50 out of 100. Mike Bloomberg got a 40, I think it was a 43 out of 100, and Elizabeth Warren got a 72 out of 100. So go watch the show from last Sunday. It's on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, and it's in audio podcast format. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, click on Listen to Podcasts. You can also read the article from TheRoot.com, Every Democratic Candidate's Black Agenda Ranked. Every Democratic Candidate's Black Agenda Ranked. That came out February 28, 2020. Since then, I think sometime in April, as I stated was going to happen when I originally did the broadcast March 10th and talked about this ranking. As campaigns go on, the candidates flesh out their campaign, add more details, add more policies, etc. So sometime in April, Joe Biden added a African American platform to his website, as well he has one for the Hispanic community and one for the Asian American Pacific Islander community as well. So go check that out at joebiden.com. All right. So Dr. Christina Greer said the black vote is not going to be free, Diddy said on Naomi Campbell's web series, No Filter with Naomi. We want to know Diddy said we want to know very clearly, just like Trump made it clear that he wanted to build a wall, Biden needs to make it clear that he's going to change the lives and quality of life of black people, brown people. He added, or else he can't get the vote. I will hold the vote hostage if I have to. Now, I don't know how he's going to hold the vote hostage. There's a better chance we may hold his ass hostage. Okay, not literally, but figuratively. Or maybe literally, we'll see. But not literally, but figuratively. But I doubt if Diddy has actually read Biden's policies. And I doubt if Diddy has actually studied the close to 200 policies from the Obama administration that Trump has reversed, as I talked about in part 1 of this broadcast. Okay. So Dr. Christina Greer said, I agree with Diddy. Joe Biden and the Democrats cannot take the black vote for granted. However, Diddy then went on to state that he would, quote, hold the vote hostage if I have to, end quote. She says, sir, what does that even mean? How will you hold the vote hostage? Will you encourage African Americans not to vote? I shudder to think that is your strategy. If it is, let me count just some of the ways that would be detrimental to not only the African American community, but the nation and world for generations to come. Also, it seems like Diddy doesn't understand the difference between federal law, state law, and local. State and local have a lot to do with this, but they depend on the federal government. And in his little comments, I noticed he mentioned the 26 million plus jobs lost in 5 weeks at the time he made those comments. About 3 million jobs lost by African Americans. He didn't talk about how less African Americans have health care today than when President Obama left office. How Trump has reversed the initiatives dealing with criminal justice reform that the Obama administration put in place. All these things he just didn't dealing with policy. Okay. Now I don't know, maybe it's because he used to be friends with Donald Trump until Diddy got caught with that gun that Shine took the rap for. Because if you go back and look at comments that Donald Trump made when Diddy got caught with the gun and J-Lo was in the limo and all that stuff, Donald Trump act like he didn't know Diddy. Before then, Trump was talking like he and Diddy were friends. Because there are pictures of them together. When that happened, Trump distanced himself with Diddy, act like he really didn't know him. Oh, I see him every now and then, we say hi, things like that. This is what happened. Okay. So, Dr. Christina Greer, who's an African-American woman, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, she said, first, black women are the canaries in the mine, or canaries in the coal mine. The reason why black women are so active, participatory, and knowledgeable about politics is because what happens in our homes and communities often has rippling effects for the larger economy, criminal justice system, education system, and more. Encouraging African Americans to abstain from what is possibly the most important election of our lifetime is not only selfish, it's incredibly short-sighted. But Diddy is largely insulated. He's damn near a billionaire, so he's largely insulated from the effects of what's going on right now. He probably benefited from Donald Trump's $1.4 trillion tax cut, which hurt a lot of everyday African Americans. A lot of us thought we were going to get a tax refund like we normally do and didn't get a tax refund, ended up owing money. The Donald Trump's $1.4 trillion tax cut, which added about close to $2 trillion to the national debt. 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. She said, as we know, African American women make pennies on the dollar compared to their white counterparts. Actually, 61 cents on the dollar for every $1 that the average white male makes. The average African American woman makes 61 cents on the dollar for every $1 that the average white male makes. And that's what Black Women's Equal Pay Day is all about. Now, a few years ago, it was 67 cents on the dollar. Now it's 61 cents on the dollar. But in the state of Louisiana, it's 47 cents on the dollar. So this is why raising the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour would be so beneficial for African Americans, especially African American women. African Americans in general, men and women. But especially African American women, because African American men make about 79 cents on the dollar that every white male makes. African American women on average 61 cents. Read this article from blackenterprise.com. We talked about this last week. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. This is from blackenterprise.com, October 17, 2019. Now, this is not I want to make this clear. This is not a black man versus white. This is not a black man versus black women issue. This is not what this is. But African American women, in many ways, are more vulnerable. A black woman will lose out on $946,120 over a 40-year career if she continues to make 61 cents on the dollar that every white male earns due to the wage gap, analysis by the National Women's Law Center shows. Quote, assuming she and her white non-Hispanic male counterpart began work at age 20, an African American woman would have to work until she is age 86 years old to catch up to what a white non-Hispanic man has been paid by age 60. The average African American woman will have to work till age 86 to make the same amount of money that the average white male makes by age 60. It takes the average African American woman 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white male makes in 12 months. This is what Black Women's Equal Pay Day is all about, closing that racial wage gap. Okay, read the rest of this article here. And then it goes, because it talks about the $15 an hour, because that bill passed the U.S. House of Representatives. Democrats passed that bill in the U.S. House of Representatives July 2019. It's being blocked in the U.S. Senate by Moscow Mitch McConnell and Republicans. I wonder why. Also, the Paycheck Fairness Act would help close that racial wage gap as well. Okay, and then they talk about how African American women with doctorate degrees, advanced education among African American women has not been shown to lower the wage gap. In fact, the gap is largest for the most educated black women. Doctorate degree holders who are black women tend to make 60% of what their white male counterparts make. Quote, black women have the highest student loan debt of any racial or ethnic group. For an undergraduate degree, the average black woman carries nearly $30,400 in debt compared to $19,500 for white men. The wage gap lessens black women's ability to pay off educational debt, creating an additional barrier to saving money that could be used to buy a home, start a business, or be used for emergencies. So when Joe Biden adopts it was either Elizabeth Warren or I think Bernie Sanders policy, a version of that, for giving up to $100,000 in student loan debt, that disproportionately benefits African Americans, especially African American women, because they tend to have higher student loan debt. African American men have student loan debt also. So this is understanding how policies impact us. And then when we look at the reversals in policies that Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos has made dealing with student loan debt, especially student loan debt dealing with predatory colleges. Because there were policies put in place by the Obama administration dealing with student loan forgiveness for people who got stuck with student loan debts from predatory colleges that disproportionately impacts African Americans and Hispanics. Because we went to a lot of these colleges, we saw the commercials, we wanted to better ourselves. We take out the student loans, go through the programs. We don't get placed in a job that has anything to do with our degree. We're stuck with the student loan debt. So Betsy DeVos really stalled on following these policies put in place by the Obama administration that was with student loan forgiveness. And also we know the Obama administration shut down a lot of these predatory colleges like ITT Tech and Corinthian College, which disproportionately targeted African Americans and Hispanics. This is, you see, a lot of people don't understand really what these different departments do. Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, Department of Justice, Environmental Protection Agency. All these entities impact every aspect of our lives. Okay, so read that from blackenterprise.com. Black women lose out over $1 million in their career thanks to the wage gap. That impacts African American men also. Because we in general marry African American women. There are mothers, there are sisters, there are wives, there are girlfriends. That impacts us. But also, the wage gap impacts African American men as well. We make about 79%, maybe 80%, but I think it's about 79%. 79 cents on every dollar that the average white male makes. Okay, so let's continue here. Let's go back to the article from thegrill.com. How's everybody doing on Facebook and YouTube also? All right, we're back on YouTube as well. Got Ronald. Yeah, this is part 2 of the show, Ronald. All right. Zoom froze up on me for some reason, so then I had to do part 2, do a second broadcast. Okay, so Dr. Christina Greer said encouraging black people to abstain from what is possibly the most important election of our lifetime is not only selfish, it's incredibly short-sighted. This will be the most important election of most of our lifetimes up until now. She said, as we know, black women make pennies on the dollar compared to their white counterparts, while this president and his Republican sycophants are eroding the economic security of millions of people by breaking up unions, failing to pay people of color an equal living wage, defunding educational systems, bankrupting families in unequal hospital systems, because funding for hospitals has a lot to do with legislation, has a lot to do with government, and destroying the social safety net We cannot make a false equivalent argument about the two parties. How do you plan to hold the vote hostage when the Republican Party is already doing everything in its power to prevent black people from voting in free and fair elections? Just look at the 2018 Georgia gubernatorial race, where rampant voter disenfranchisement was so widespread, even Republicans could not believe what they were seeing. That's the election that Governor Brian Kemp, Secretary of State Brian Kemp, stole from Stacey Abrams. That genius Brian Kemp, who just a few weeks ago said he just found out that you could be asymptomatic and infect somebody with coronavirus. And the headquarters of the Center for Disease Control is down the street from his office. And he said he just found out. He said it was a game changer. He said, I just found out in the last 24 hours. I didn't know that. So the same thing happened in Florida, where ballots were found in school closets days after the election. And lest we forget, just a few weeks ago when Wisconsin closed roughly 175 polling stations and reduced the voters in the Milwaukee area to exercise their right to vote in just 5 polling stations. We have enough hostages in our electoral system. Of course, the Democratic Party needs to be more responsive to the specific and diverse needs of African Americans. However, if you do not participate, you lose leverage during decision-making time. Yeah, and see, what I find interesting when people say stupid stuff like this, stupid ass nonsense like this, that Diddy's saying, right? They don't talk about the damage that Trump has done in the past 3 years with his policies to the African Americans. In part 1 of the broadcast, I talked about like his 35-day partial government shutdown. People really have not. I did a broadcast dealing with how that was detrimental to African Americans, African American farmers, people being laid off from work, federal employees being laid off from work, or you not getting paid and still have to go to work. That means you got to pay for gas, you have to pay for child care. There's some people still haven't recovered from that. And this right here that's taking place with coronavirus and how it's shutting down African American owned businesses, many of our businesses are not going to survive this. See, if you watch MSNBC, Stephanie Rule is the senior business correspondent. She's talking about how we have not seen the real fallout from this, because on the back end of this are going to be massive bankruptcies. And very few people are talking about the massive bankruptcies that are going to happen. The evictions, the foreclosures, and the bankruptcies that are going to take place on the back end. And they're going to be disproportionately African Americans who are going to have to file for bankruptcy, who are going to be evicted and face foreclosure. So she said, if you support policies of Bernie Sanders and are distraught your candidate failed to secure anything close to a nomination, know that Joe Biden's policies are more closely aligned to Bernie Sanders than Donald Trump will ever be. That's true. If you study Donald Trump's policies, you study what this jackass has been doing, that's absolutely true. No matter what the president says in a soundbite, it takes a particularly privileged position to abstain from the voting process. Maybe one can afford to do so in Diddy's economic bracket, but most people cannot. Far too many African Americans cannot afford a missed paycheck, let alone a missed election. The president is relying on sowing just enough seeds of dissension to either convince African American, especially male voters, to cast a vote for him, or convince African American voters to sit out of this election. This is what I said last week and the week before and the week before that. When Donald Trump asked African Americans in 2016, what the hell do you have to lose? The correct answer was everything. When he asked black people, what the hell do you have to lose? The correct answer was everything. Your health insurance, your job, your house, your life. The correct answer was everything. She said, here's what another 4 years of a Trump administration looks like. We haven't even talked about 250 federal judges confirmed from Donald Trump, many of them anti-civil rights, many of them anti-affirmative action. Donald Trump has nominated 1/4 of the federal judges. These are lifetime appointments. Because since white people have a negative birth rate in 26 states out of 50, that's not me. That's the U.S. Census Bureau, June 2018, the memo the U.S. Census Bureau put out. And it talked about how 2 years prior to that, it was 17 states out of 50. Now it's 26 states out of 50. New York Times has an article dealing with this as well. Dealing with, let me see, let's pull this up here. Let's see. New York Times has one, and it's citing the Census Bureau. Fewer births than deaths. Fewer births than deaths among whites in majority of U.S. states. There were a number of articles that reported on this when the press release came out from the U.S. Census Bureau. I've talked about this a number of times. June 20th, 2018. Deaths now outnumber births among white people in more than half the states in the country. Demographers have found, signaling what could be a faster than expected transition to a future in which whites are no longer a majority of the American population. The Census Bureau has projected that whites could drop below 50% of the population around the year 2045, a relatively slow-moving change that has been years in the making. But a new report this week found, so when they say this week, they're talking about June 2018. A new report this week found that whites are dying faster than they are being born now in 26 states, up from 17 states just 2 years earlier, and demographers say that shift might come even sooner. And one of the things they attribute this to is the opioid crisis, okay? So they're saying that white people have a negative birth rate in 26 states out of 50. What's taking place, so the fear is that by, some white people have this fear, all of them don't have this fear, but some white people do have this fear, that by the year 2045, that white people will no longer be the majority population in this country. So you have some white people who are fearing this. What's taking place with the Republican Party, what's taking place with a lot of conservatives, is being that they see that they are going to lose the population fight, being that they see they're going to lose that, their goal is to maintain control of the federal courts for the next 25, 30, 35 years. So what happened was, when in the last 2 years of the Obama administration, when Democrats lost the U.S. Senate in 2014, what that did was they couldn't get President Obama's federal judge nominations confirmed. Moscow Mitch McConnell becomes Senate Majority Leader because Republicans are in control of the Senate like they are now. So the last 2 years of the Obama administration, Mitch McConnell and Republicans blocked President Obama's nominations to the federal bench. About 2 months ago, Mitch McConnell was on Fox News, interviewed by Sean Hannity, bragging about blocking President Obama's nominations to the federal bench. There were 103 federal bench nominations that were vacant when Trump became president. So the number one goal that the Republicans have had, led by Moscow Mitch McConnell in the Senate, is to confirm as many ultra-conservative, young, largely male, white male judges to these lifetime appointments. This is because they want to gain control of the courts. Then also as many U.S. Supreme Court nominations as they can as well. Read this entire article. This is they're playing the long game, okay? But you need the presidency, and you have to maintain control of the U.S. Senate to be able to do this. They're playing the long game. In 2016, I saw dozens of interviews with Donald Trump supporters. and Republicans in general, but also Donald Trump supporters. All Republicans in 2016 were not Donald Trump supporters. Some of them voted for Donald Trump as a last resort. The reason why is they were following an agenda. Republicans said, this is about the courts. They said this is about the Supreme Court nominations. This is about the federal courts. They said this is about the courts. So they saw Trump as a tool to bring about, to fulfill their agenda, to control the federal courts. Okay, so read this article here from New York Times. And let's see here. Let's go to this broadcast. Where are we broadcasting? All right. Yeah, so read this one from the New York Times. But see, this all deals with understanding politics, understanding strategy. Okay, average person don't understand none of this stuff. Because I see a lot of the comments people make on social media. A lot of people are not explaining this to our people because they don't know it, because they don't study politics. I do. I'm not just a historian, I study politics as well. All right. This is grandmaster level chess. Many of our people playing beginner's checkers and don't even understand all the rules to checkers. This is grandmaster level chess. That's what this is. All right, and then read the article. Let's see, yahoonews.com had the article dealing with Moscow Mitch McConnell when he was on Sean Hannity's show. Mitch McConnell brags about blocking Obama for 2 years, then laughs about it. December 13th, 2019. Mitch McConnell brags about blocking Obama for 2 years, then laughs about it. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, who's up for re-election and needs to be voted out of office, on Thursday night bragged about blocking President Barack Obama's attempt to fill federal judicial vacancies for 2 years. Then he laughed about it as he discussed the Republican Party's effort to stack the courts with conservative judges under Donald Trump. See, this is how elections have consequences. So most of the people told you don't vote in 2016. We just gonna build 5-story buildings and do economic empowerment, invest in the stock market. They ain't saying anything about federal judges. They ain't talking about what was at stake. They didn't tell you federal judges is a lifetime appointment. And this is federal judges in the Federal Appeals Court. They didn't talk about the U.S. Supreme Court is at stake, how many federal judgeships, how many vacancies there were to be filled at the federal benches, federal judgeships. Let's see. We've got. Let's see if we can play this clip here. We've got time.
Let's talk about the issue has come up. Let's say somebody were to retire at the end of this year, leading into the summer. You have been very clear, if the president appointed somebody, you would follow through on that nomination.
Absolutely. We definitely would do that. And this paperback that we were just talking about, the president's foreword is about judges. My afterword catches up what's happened during the Trump administration on judges, because my memoir came out 3 years ago before the president was elected. What we've done here, the president and I together with this paperback that you've shown on the screen, is to talk about how the Judge Project came about, how it went forward. If you were to recall, Sean, the most important decision I've made in my entire political career was not to fill the Supreme Court vacancy when Justice Scalia passed away. That was the beginning. And now we've got an exclamation point here after 3 years that we thought the public would be interested in reading about. And that's why the president and I collaborated on this paperback.
I was shocked that former President Obama left so many vacancies and didn't try to fill those positions.
I'll tell you why. I was in charge of the of what we did the last 2 years of the Obama administration.
I will give you full credit for that. And by the way, take a bow. All right, that was a good line.
Okay, so here is now. See, the average person doesn't understand this. People told you don't vote 2016. They probably ain't explained none of this to you. Here is Moscow Mitch McConnell on Fox News talking to Sean Hannity, bragging about blocking President Obama's nominations to the federal bench in the last 2 years because that has to be confirmed by the Senate, and Republicans control the Senate so they could block his nominations. And then Trump gets in office. There are at least 103 vacancies. And Mitch McConnell's #1 goal is to confirm as many ultra-conservative, young white male federal judges as possible. That's what he wants his legacy to be. Okay? All right. So read this article here from YahooNews.com. Mitch McConnell brags about blocking Obama for 2 years, then laughs about it. I wonder if Diddy's going to educate the people on this. I doubt it. This is from December 2019. Okay, let's continue here. Let's go back to Dr. Christina Greer, who's somebody who actually studies politics. Okay, she said, here's what another 4 years. Okay, she broke down what another 4 years of Trump. That's like the Cliff Notes edition. She said it will also lead to defunding HBCUs and other educational institutions, defunding public schools in cities, a continuation of harsh immigration and deportation policies that will disproportionately affect Afro-Caribbean and African families. Because I notice when I hear African Americans talk about immigration and undocumented immigrants, things like that, they usually don't talk about black immigrants and black undocumented immigrants. Because the black undocumented immigrants are the first ones to be deported. You notice how they just leave that out? They don't talk, they don't talk about Haitians, Jamaicans, those from Trinidad, Barbados, from the African nations, things like that. It's just totally just miss that for some reason. I can't figure out why. They just usually just totally miss that. So she said Afro-Cuban and African families, appointing judges who will criminalize poverty and calcify the school to prison pipeline. The list goes on and on. She said it is beyond irresponsible to make a false equivalency and even hint at suggesting African Americans withhold their vote. American institutions are specifically designed for gradual change. A Biden presidency won't bring rapid change overnight. That is not the intentional design of American democracy. Not only that, a lot of this has to do with state legislatures, governors, state legislatures, and at your city level, mayor, city council. A lot of people just put all the onus on the president, and that's not how this works. Now, if you don't study politics, then you just believe that. This is why in 2010, I heard a lot of black people saying, "Oh, we're not going to vote in 2010 midterm elections. We're not going to vote for Congress or anything. We voted for President Obama. That was it." You ever read the U.S. Constitution? You understand the powers of Congress based upon Article 1? You understand Congress controls the purse strings? I mean, the White House sends the annual federal budget to Congress to confirm the annual federal budget. I mean, our condition would be a lot better if we just read. Like if we read like the U.S. Constitution, a lot of this stuff we would understand a whole lot better, and our actions will fall in line better with our level of understanding. Because the Constitution lays all this stuff out. We just haven't read it. Donald Trump hasn't read it either. He just found out about the powers of the states, the 10th Amendment, like 3 weeks ago. Go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website. Read the U.S. Constitution. You get this book here. I think this is still like $2. The Declaration of Independence and other great documents of American history, especially focused on the U.S. Constitution. Because Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution tells you that the U.S. Constitution, all of the previous treaties and all of the subsequent treaties are the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is the foundation of all of this. She said, however, we do know Biden will surround himself with individuals who actually do know a thing or two about policy. We do know Biden is not interested in a kleptocracy like the current resident at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, because the Little Rascals and the Three Stooges are running the government. Little Rascal and the Three Stooges. Jared Kushner is Alfalfa. Ivanka Trump is Darla. Donald Trump is Spanky. Mike Pence is which one's Mike Pence? He's Larry. No. Yeah, Donald Trump is Spanky. Mike Pence is probably Larry, and Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, he's Curly. So it's like the Three Stooges and the Little Rascals are running the government. She said, we do know Biden believes in science, climate change, listening to experts, and moving to the left on policy when confronted. Because with the whole debacle and mishandling of coronavirus, in this pandemic, this is what happens when you have a president who declares war on the scientists, who doesn't read his presidential daily briefing. Because as I said in part one, there were numerous warnings in the presidential daily briefing going back to January and February about coronavirus. Donald Trump missed that. You have to have a president who is going to properly handle the economy. Because it's President Obama who saved the economy and handed a largely healthy economy to Trump. There were problems with the economy, but it was a much healthier economy than the one he got from Bush. 22 million jobs, 15.1 million jobs created during the Obama administration. 2.95 million went to African Americans. Since the recovery starting in 2010, 22 million jobs created. 30 million been lost in 6 weeks under the unstable genius. She said, so let's continue here. She went on to wrap up and say, black people cannot afford to sit out and see the 45th president reelected so he can further erode decency, our economy, truth, and all of the struggles of our parents and ancestors. Not only that, if you think Trump is unhinged right now, you don't want to see what happens if he gets reelected and doesn't have to worry about a third term. Now, if you damn near a billionaire, you're insulated from all that. He intends to do it, and he is banking on a percentage of African Americans ignoring the facts and sitting out this important election. She said Diddy is known to wear his trademark t-shirt, vote or die, and in the era of COVID-19 and the systemic racism and mismanagement of this president and his entire administration, that statement couldn't be more true. Yeah, because this next election is literally about vote or die. This election right here is literally about vote or die. Because we see what happens when you don't vote. And this is why there was rampant voter suppression. Republicans targeted African Americans with a voter suppression campaign. It was African Americans, Hispanics, college students, but especially African Americans. That's historical. And this goes back to, I hate to bring this up. This goes back to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act being gutted by the U.S. Supreme Court case Shelby County versus Holder 2013, which was backlash to a record number of African Americans voting in the 2012 presidential election. 67.6% of African Americans registered to vote voted in the 2012 election. President Obama was on the ballot. They scared the hell out of Republicans. They came back in 2013 with the backlash. We didn't see the backlash. We don't understand political self-defense. Understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans, understanding how to see trends, how to protect yourself from trends, how to protect gains that have been made. How do you protect gains that were made if you're under the misconception that no gains were made? 2013 U.S. Supreme Court case Shelby County versus Holder guts Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that most people don't understand. When it was gutted, it was cheered by then Senator from Alabama, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, who went on to become Donald Trump's first Attorney General. And The 2016 presidential election was the first election in 50 years, presidential election in 50 years, that you did not have the full weight, the full power of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Therefore, there were 868 fewer polling places in 2016. 868 fewer polling places in 2016. How do we know? Read the article from Ari Berman from thenation.com, who wrote a series of articles for The Nation dealing with voter suppression and things like this leading up to the 2016 election. Because I reported on this real time while it was happening. And he talked about how because of the U.S. Supreme Court case, Shelby County versus Holder, he wrote an article. There are 868 fewer places to vote in 2016 because the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. This is from November 4th, 2016. Okay, this ties into what's going on today, and there's 1,700 fewer polling places. There's 1,700 fewer polling places. This tied into some of the voter suppression we saw during the 2020 primaries in Texas, when we saw a lot of long lines of people voting in Texas, and how African Americans and Hispanics were disproportionately impacted by that. Part of that ties into the 2013 U.S. Supreme Court case. Okay, so this deals with understanding history and law, court cases, things like this. All of this impacts us. Let's post this article here. This is from The Nation. All right, just a minute here. So we're going to wrap up this article here. I think there's one paragraph left. I'm going to post this here on YouTube. Okay. All right, and I've said before. If you watch my broadcast, I said before, whoever wins, I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, and I don't belong to the Democratic Party, Republican Party, but I study policy, and I study whose policies are most beneficial for African Americans. Now, most people don't study policy; they just repeat nonsense they hear in YouTube videos, in documentaries, nonsense like that. I study policies. So, when you vote for a candidate, it doesn't mean you agree with everything a candidate has said in the past, or every vote they've taken, or every policy they've supported. You're voting not based upon it's not based upon the political party; it's based upon the policies. It's not about the political party. It's not about the personality. It's about the policies. That's what's most important. All right, let's go back to this article from Dr. Christina Greer. So she said African Americans cannot afford to sit out and see the 45th president reelected so he can further erode decency, our economy, truth, and all of the struggles of our parents and ancestors. He intends to do it, and he is banking on a percentage of African Americans ignoring the facts and sitting out this important election. The Trump administration has also been gutting the civil rights departments at the Department of Justice, Department of Education, the Environmental Protection Agency, all across the board. There's civil rights departments all across the board. They have been reducing the amount of staff in to reduce the amount of work that these civil rights departments can do also. Diddy is known to wear his trademark vote or die, and in the era of COVID-19 and systemic racism and mismanagement of this president and his entire administration, that statement couldn't be more true. Maybe Diddy should tell his boy Trump to cut it all out and stop it. Maybe Trump will listen to him. I don't know. Just a thought. All right, so check this out here from thegrio.com. We'll post the link here for this one also. All right. Remember back in the day when a lot of African American hip hop artists were talking about Donald Trump in their music and their songs and things like this? All right, then I found the article from blackenterprise.com. NAACP President Derek Johnson demands federal government do more to help black businesses. All right. Also, once again, be sure and go back and watch the. Actually, I'm gonna post a link here. The what was that, April 26th show, when I broke down the policies of Bernie Sanders compared them to Joe Biden, and Biden has expanded his policy. We have to study the policy. Read all the policies on his website. He's added an African American platform. He's added a Hispanic platform. He's added an Asian American Pacific Islander platform. Read the entire platform, because those policies, even ones that don't say black or African American, they will largely impact African Americans also. We don't study policy and understand how this impacts us. Okay, so according NAACP President Derek Johnson wants to ensure that provisions focusing on small and minority businesses are included in the coronavirus relief packages. This is from April 29th from blackenterprise.com. According to BET, Derek Johnson did not mince words when speaking on the virus's impact on African Americans. He said, quote, "The current public health crisis has exposed the weakness of the policy reality for African Americans in all areas, including health, economic groundability, and lack of access to multiple critical needs." Derek Johnson said, quote, "I equate what's taking place now to what happened during Hurricane Katrina," end quote. African Americans are in a tough position during the pandemic. They're more likely to work low wage positions and less likely to what is this here? Less likely to be able to telecommute. Additionally, due to decades of inadequate health care and nutrition, African Americans are more likely to have pre-existing conditions that are complicated by the coronavirus. Okay, diabetes, asthma, high blood pressure, hypertension, obesity, bronchitis, lupus, all the, things like that. Derek Johnson believes the federal government is almost refusing to help African American businesses. Derek Johnson believes the federal government is almost refusing to help African American businesses. However, in doing so, they're leaving millions on the table. African Americans are the fastest growing community to create new businesses over the last decade, especially African American women. Quote, "The response in the stimulus package that have been passed to date has created a vacuum for those same businesses because banks have been given the latitude to cherry pick their large customers over smaller customers," end quote, Derek Johnson told BET. Johnson added that the NAACP has been working with the Black Bankers Association and minority financial institutions such as Carver Bank and One United Bank to help African American business owners. The NAACP does a lot more than people really actually think they do. If you go to NAACP.org, the national website, you sign up for the email newsletter, things like that. The NAACP does a lot more, far more than what the average person actually thinks that they do. You can read reporting from Black Press USA. Black Press USA is on Facebook. I follow them on Facebook because they have a lot of articles pertaining to the African American community, our organizations, things like this. There are a lot of things that our organizations do that you don't see talked about on MSNBC or CNN. Joy Reade may talk about it on the weekend. Reverend Al Sharpton may talk about it on the weekend on MSNBC, but largely during the week, a lot of that stuff is not covered. Okay? So this is why African American media is so important. Okay, so Derek Johnson added that the NAACP has been working with the Black Bankers Association and minority financial institutions such as Carver Bank. These are African American owned banks, Carver Bank and One United Bank to help African American business owners. The NAACP is also pushing for a complete discharge of student loans for those who serve the public interest, those who work for government or nonprofit organizations, and those in the medical profession. African Americans are getting some help from their own during the pandemic. Jay-Z said, and then also we know P. Diddy and other African American celebrities have either donated or fundraised to help African Americans through the pandemic. Okay, there was an article from ShopBlack.com, and I'm going to see if I can pull this up quickly here because this is freezing up on me. Let me see here. There was a fund that Diddy set up, and I know we're in overtime. I mean, this is just a fraction of the content I have for tonight's show, so I'm cutting it short. Believe me, I'm really cutting this short because this is like a lot. I've been busy during the week, haven't been able to do broadcasts, so I have a lot of content. Let's see here. ShopBlack.us, SHOPPE, ShopBlack.us had this article. Let me try to find it here. Okay, Diddy partners with black-owned banks to help black businesses access funding. I posted about this on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. This is before those stupid-ass comments he made to Naomi Campbell came out, right? So, because I had this in the notes to talk about tonight, because this is something positive. This is from April 27th, 2020. Diddy partners with black-owned banks to help black businesses access funding. Diddy has launched OurFairShare.com, OurFairShare, OurFairShare.com, which is a platform built to help minority entrepreneurs and small businesses access much needed capital amid the economic devastation brought by COVID-19. The initial round of Paycheck Protection Program, PPP dollars, disproportionately went to those with the right connections rather than the greatest needs. Our Fair Share will help minority-owned companies learn about the Paycheck Protection Program and get connected to approved Small Business Administration SBA lenders that can process applications for these potential business saving loans. Quote, COVID-19 is devastating our communities, and without access to stimulus funding, we risk losing critical businesses that create jobs and help build opportunities and wealth in our communities, end quote, said Sean P. Diddy Combs. Quote, I created Our Fair Share to help entrepreneurs play on an even playing field and give them a chance to survive with the hope to thrive, end quote, he said. Combs further announced a partnership with the National Bankers Association, the trade group representing minority-owned financial institutions, to connect minority-owned banks and financial technology companies to the Our Fair Share platform and enable these banks to originate Paycheck Protection Program loans from applications that utilize the site. Our Fair Share is designed to help ensure diverse small businesses, independent contractors, and nonprofit organizations is designed to help ensure these different entities understand that they are eligible and how to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program loans. This provides clear information about the requirements for a successful application. The applications are connected to approved PPP lenders. The lead institutions are the Harbor Bank of Maryland, based in Baltimore, Maryland, Liberty Bank and Trust, based in New Orleans, Louisiana, Carver State Bank, based in Savannah, Georgia, and Lendistry, an online small business lender based in Los Angeles, California. Now, I'm not sure about Lendistry, but all the other ones, those are African American owned banks. Now, Sean Combs also shared a longer term vision for our fair share as a connector for entrepreneurs searching for capital and capital providers. The platform will be dedicated to getting funding into the hands of the entrepreneurs that need it and will evolve to meet the needs of the minority small business community. Kenneth Kelly is chairman of the National Bankers Association. Kenneth Kelly said, quote, "It is inspiring to see a cultural icon like Sean Combs partnering with minority banks and others to ensure economic opportunity for minorities in this program." So our leaders in economics, politics, and culture must unite because the COVID-19 healthcare and economic impacts on our communities are interrelated. We can help our communities weather this storm if we work together, Kenneth Kelly, chairman of the National Bankers Association, said. Okay, so on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, Tuesday before last, the U.S. Senate passed a $484 billion bill in the new pandemic relief funds to provide additional funding to the Paycheck Protection Program, small business aid program, pay for coronavirus testing, and help hospitals that have been hit hard by sick patients. The PPP is part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. That's the CARES Act. Okay, that's what CARES stands for. Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act. Which was the original $2 trillion stimulus package the U.S. Congress approved on March 27th. Okay, you can read the rest of this. And let's see, let's go to this clip from Diddy here.
Hello, this is Sean Diddy Combs, and welcome to Our Fair Share. We created this platform to give small businesses access to the capital that they need to survive. It's well known that we don't get our fair share of venture capital and small business loans in normal times. But given the devastation of COVID-19, the pain that it has inflicted on your small businesses and on entrepreneurs, you cannot afford to get your fair share. And this stimulus money is available to barbershops, hair salons, nightclubs, clothing brands, restaurants, bars, bodegas, liquor stores, and retail stores, and anyone else that is self-employed. There are billions of dollars in the stimulus money our government is making available so your businesses can make it through this difficult times. So our team has worked hard to provide a lot of helpful information to help you complete a successful application. So please learn as much as you can, but don't move slow. Move today. Early bird gets the worm. Good luck, and please leave us feedback so we can improve the way to help you. And attention to all of the big financial institutions. We need some of that money too, okay? And if you're a financial institution and you care about economic equality, and you're trying to empower some entrepreneurs of color, contact me. Love. Our fair share.
Okay, so that was Diddy announcing the launch of OurFairShare.com. Okay, that also happened this past week. That happened before that other stupid ass nonsense happened. Okay, so I'm a fair person. He did something stupid. I talked about that. He did something good. I talked about that also. Okay. All right, so this is something really good that I posted when the day this article came out from shopblack.us. They have a lot of good articles here. at shopblack.us, shop with 2 P's. I shared it on my Facebook fan page. It got a huge response. So we're going to post this link here also. Everybody check that out. Be sure to go back and watch my show from April 26th, especially where I go through and break down these policies. Especially when I go through and break down these policies from Joe Biden and how they will positively impact the African American community. And I also talk about the policies from Donald Trump and how they've been detrimental to the African American community. Okay, I'm not just a historian, I also study politics. All right. Hey, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show through PayPal, okay, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the yellow donate button right on the home page, and if you want to set up for a recurring donation, you can. If you're not in a position to donate at this point in time, I totally understand it as well. Then also, all of my DVD lectures are at our website, also AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have a lot of them in bundle packs also. Okay, so that was Diddy talking about our fair share. Now, okay, so I did that, we did that, and now I want to talk about self-made. We've got that. I'm going to make sure I cover everything here. Just give me a second here. Okay, so a few weeks ago, I talked about the miniseries on Netflix entitled Self-Made, which is inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. Now, I've talked about Madam C.J. Walker a number of times. I deal with her in my lecture series, Great African Women, A History of the Mothers of Civilization. And this past week I went through and watched it twice, okay, because I've been so busy. And I have Netflix, but I hadn't even watched Netflix in about a week, at least here at home. I haven't even watched it, so I renewed my subscription because I only watch Netflix about once a month, right? When I first heard about this series, I was excited because the story of Madam C.J. Walker really needs to be told. For us to see the factory that she had and the system, the sales system that she created, and hiring thousands of African American women to sell her products, and these women learn about business, they learn about sales. Most of them made more money than their husbands. Okay. So we need to really see something like this. And what's important to understand is that this is 45, 50 years after slavery ends. Okay? Even less than that, because it starts out in 1908. 1915 was the 50th year anniversary of the Civil War ending and the 13th Amendment. So we're talking about in less than 50 years, you're going to have a Madam C.J. Walker. You're going to have an Annie Turnbull Malone. Annie Turnbull Malone is the real person who the fictitious character of Addie Monroe was patterned after. Okay? So let's look at, we're going to look at two things. One, I have about 4 pages of notes I took on this. On the series. Two, let's look at this article from OprahMag.com because they interviewed Alelia Bundles. Alelia Bundles is the great-great-granddaughter of great-great-great-granddaughter of Madam C.J. Walker. And she wrote the biography on her own ground. And the series is loosely based on that biography also. Okay. Now, at one point, Halle Berry was supposed to play the role of Madam C.J. Walker. And it ended up being Octavia Spencer. Okay, Octavia Spencer did a great job. But let's see here. Before the Bundles was interviewed by Oprah Mag, and I think she's talking. Who is she talking about here? So Halle Berry was once suggested to play the role of Madam C.J. Walker. This is just one detail that Lilia Bundles, biographer, journalist, and Madam C.J. Walker's great-great-great-great-granddaughter reveals when discussing her 50-year journey of bringing her descendant's story to the small screen. Now, before Self-Made, Walker's life was nearly made into a TV miniseries in the 1980s, backed by Roots author Alex Haley before his death. But after bouncing to several producers, directors, and studios like Columbia TriStar and HBO, the project always hit a roadblock. The suggestion that Halle Berry star as Madam C.J. Walker, whose real name was Sarah Breedlove, the suggestion that Halle Berry stars Madam C.J. Walker, before the show was optioned to Netflix, Lilia Bundles explains the possibility was posed to her years ago by a director who was interested in collaborating on the project. Lilia Bundles, the great-great-great-granddaughter of Madam C.J. Walker, and I'm going to reach out to her to set up an interview with. I've talked to her before. We're Facebook friends, and I've talked to her a few times in the past. She said, quote, "I said she's a really great actress," referring to Halle Berry, "but she doesn't look anything like Madam C.J. Walker." Bundles tells OprahMag.com. She went on to say, quote, "And that person said to me, most people don't know what Madam Walker looks like, so it doesn't really matter. And I said, you know, the people who do know what Madam Walker looks like would, and I care about those people." End quote. Yeah, because Halle Berry's not, she's fine as hell, but, you know, she looks totally different. Those are two different people. Both beautiful women, but just totally different. Okay? So the role of Madam C.J. Walker ultimately went to Octavia Spencer in Netflix's Self-Made, which is based on Bundles' 2001 biography entitled On Her Own Ground. On Her Own Ground. The story isn't perfect as it faces criticism for a weak script, fact versus fiction storylines, and the way it heavily dramatizes conflict between two successful African American women on the basis of colorism. That said, Self-Made does successfully bring Madam C.J. Walker's story to the forefront, especially for those whose knowledge of her stops at one-day Black history lessons. Because most people really don't. I do lectures and I talk about Annie Turnbull Malone, I talk about Madam C.J. Walker, things like this. Most people don't know the history of Madam C.J. Walker. This is a fascinating life. This sister died when she was either 51 or 52. One source I saw said 52. Here, this article says 51. But, you know, when we look at her as well as Annie Turnbull Malone, Madam C.J. Walker was born in 1867. She's born 2 years after slavery ends. She's born to former slaves. And for her to accomplish what she did, man, it's just unbelievable. And she's doing this largely before the 50th year anniversary of the 13th Amendment and the Civil War ending. So Lilia Bundles hopes that the new show will inspire viewers to seek facts about Madam C.J. Walker's life. She said, quote, "There are characters who don't exist in real life and scenes that don't really happen. But of course, this is the way a story gets attention, and that is the way a story has to be told in Hollywood," she says. "I'm hoping that people will walk away, especially because of Octavia Spencer's strong portrayal, with a sense of Madam C.J. Walker's courage and her ability to build a business to empower other women, to see that she's more than just hair products, that she's a philanthropist and political activist." Okay, so then they go out, then they go through and list some dispel some myths and list fact versus fiction, things like this in the that's depicted in the series. Okay, I'm going to highlight a couple things. I'll do a separate video because this is the last segment of my show, and this is a 2-hour show that's not 3 hours. So I'm going to do a separate video where I go deep into this. But we'll talk. I'll give you some highlights here from my notes and my observations. There was one article that I read from, who was this from? Bustle.com. Because there was a scene that took place with Booker T. Washington, okay? And I wasn't sure if that was true or not, the depiction that happened. One, the actor, Roger Guinevere, who portrayed Booker T. Washington, fantastic actor. Don't look a damn thing like Booker T. Washington. I don't know who did the casting. I don't know what was going on with that. Roger Guinevere, he had a recurring role on A Different World. He did a one-man act where he was portraying Huey P. Newton. Fantastic actor. Okay? He was in Malcolm X, one scene in Malcolm X when they were planning a robbery. But Bustle.com has an article, Booker T. Washington and Madam C.J. Walker's feud in Self-Made was even more complicated. Okay, Booker T. Washington and Madam C.J. Walker's feud in Self-Made was even more complicated. And let's see here. Let me see if I can pull this up on the other. Let me pull this up on the other computer here. So oftentimes what happens is, well, let me back up. First of all, this is inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. When you look at it from Netflix, it doesn't say, and largely it doesn't say based on a true story. It's inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. When you see a movie or a miniseries that says inspired by something, that means that the depictions that you see are loosely based on the truth. If it says based on a true story, the depiction that you see is more accurate, but there's still going to be some fiction in there. I'm telling you right now, because it's Hollywood. There's still going to be some fiction in there. But if you see inspired by such and such, inspired by the book, that means it's loosely based on it. Okay? Which means there's going to be more fiction in it. All right, let's pull up this article here. Okay, so this is from March 20th, 2020. Booker T. Washington and Madam C.J. Walker's feud in Self-Made was even more complicated. So, let's see here. While Booker T. Washington and Madam C.J. Walker's relationship in Self-Made is purely antagonistic, in real life, it was much more complex, and their frosty relationship later gave way to mutual respect. As the miniseries Self-Made tells it, Walker's attempts at gaining the endorsement of Booker T. Washington was full of false starts. After Sarah fails to get an audience with Booker T. Washington, her husband C.J. Walker, who was actually her third husband, C.J. Charles Joseph Walker. This is where she gets the moniker Madam C.J. Walker from. That's from his name, Charles Joseph Walker, portrayed by Blair Underwood. Blair Underwood did a good job. He's a fantastic actor. He did a good job of portraying Charles Joseph Walker. So she fails to get an audience with Booker T. Washington. Charles Joseph Walker startles Walker in the bathroom, falsely conveying to Sarah that Washington agreed to dine with them. Sarah Breedlove hopes that Washington will introduce her at his 1912 National Negro Business League convention. Her hopes are dashed when he instead calls her rival Addie Monroe to the stage. Now, Addie Monroe is a fictitious character loosely based on Annie Turmo Malone, it was Annie Turmo Malone who really created the black hair care industry, and she was the one who hires Sarah Breedlove right around 1904, hires Sarah Breedlove to be a salesperson for her. So Sarah Breedlove learns the hair care industry from Annie Turmo Malone. Okay, in the miniseries, Addie Monroe, the fictitious character, who's half white, and the victim of her mother being raped by the slave master. Literally, this is alluded to in the movie, because you got to see, because the movie opens up in 1908 in St. Louis. So you still have former slaves who are still alive. Booker T. Washington doesn't die till 1915. He's a former slave. Harriet Tubman's still alive. She doesn't die till 1913. You have former slaves who are alive going into the 1940s. So slavery is a backdrop. Slavery, the legacy of slavery, former slaves, that is a subtext in this whole story. So Addie Monroe refuses to hire Tara Reade as a salesperson because she says you don't have the right look. She's saying you're too dark, because her saleswomen are basically very light skinned and a lot of them half white. Okay. So you see this depicted, okay? So for some reason, the producers decided they wanted to have this tension dealing with colorism, okay? Now, I'm not sure if they did it to draw attention to colorism, so we can learn from it to progress, or if they're suffering from it. I don't know. I'm still researching this. So let me just, okay, let's go back to this here. Booker T. Washington and Madam C.J. Walker. So we get to see Booker T. Washington's National Negro Business League Convention depicted, which is huge, okay? So her hopes are dashed when instead Booker T. Washington calls to the stage her rival Addie Monroe. Finally, after it's clear Booker T. Washington has no intention of acknowledging her presence in the audience, Tara Reade storms the stage and gives her own introduction. This infuriates Booker T. Washington, and in the hallway he calls her outburst, quote, rude and uncalled for, end quote. He accuses her company of shaming Negroes into Eurocentric standards of beauty, and that, quote, soon you will have Negro women out earning Negro men, end quote, he says. Quote, how is America going to take us seriously if we allow our women to surpass us? That outburst in there is precisely the reason why you ladies need to be kept in your place, end quote. So this is what, in the series, this is what Booker T. Washington says to her. Another subtext of this miniseries is misogyny in the African American community. That's a subtext of this, keeping women in their place, because the wife of Booker T. Washington is portrayed, and they're part of a national colored women's organization. But these are all mainly college-educated, accomplished women, and Madam C.J. Walker is saying, why are you content with being in the background and serving lunch to the men and things like this? She said, a lot of you all are more educated than your husbands are. Now, she's not advocating for them to try to be superior to their husbands. But what she's saying is that why are we relegated to the background? Why are we not out in the forefront with the men, as opposed to being relegated to the background? So when you watch this, you see that context there. Now, one of the things I wish had been depicted in the film, and then at the end of the fourth installment, they talk about some of her philanthropic endeavors, and they talk about some of her activism because she gets involved in the anti-lynching efforts, right? Just like in the civil rights movement. See, there was misogyny in the civil rights movement that's not talked about a lot. Now, John Lewis has talked about this. Representative John Lewis has talked about this because the civil rights movement was largely, in general, led by African-American male ministers. So misogyny is coming out of white supremacy and racism. It's taught to us, and some African-American men internalize it and act based upon the program. So it was in the civil rights movement. We also see it going back to these movements in the early 1900s. And so we saw it with William Monroe Trotter. William Monroe Trotter, brilliant brother. William Monroe Trotter, civil rights leader, things like this. But William Monroe Trotter was a sexist. Dr. King was a sexist also. This is something that's not talked about a lot. This is why Dr. King and Ella Baker didn't get along very well. Because Dr. King didn't feel that a woman should be in a leadership position in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, a permanent leadership position. Ella Baker was a co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, along with Dr. King in 1957. But see, this is a subtext of the civil rights movement. When you really study history, you see this. But and Ella Baker is going to end up leaving the Southern Christian Leadership Conference when she gets passed over for a permanent leadership position. It's because of sexism. And we see this going back into the early 1900s in a lot of these organizations as well. Because, see, William Monroe Trotter didn't believe that women belonged in the movement. So I don't think he got along too well with Ida B. Wells because they were both in the Afro-American Afro-American Council together. This is before the Niagara Movement. Niagara Movement comes along in 1905. Before the Niagara Movement, you had the Afro-American Council created in 1898 by T. Thomas Fortune and Bishop Alexander Walters. And Dr. W.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, Booker T. Washington, they're all members of the Afro-American Council. It's called Afro-American because the term Afro-American goes back to the 1830s. They ain't starting in the 1960s, like some people believe. That goes back to the 1830s. Just like the Afro-American newspaper, that goes back to about 1882 in Baltimore, still exists today. Okay? So when you like study these different dynamics and nuances of these different movements, right? You start seeing this subcontext. All right, so let's continue here. So Booker T. Washington in the series chastises Madam C.J. Walker. So Self-Made is based on her own ground by Madam C.J. Walker's great-great-granddaughter, Lydia Bundles. Now, in the piece from Oprah.com, it said great-great-great-granddaughter. I think she's the great-great-great-granddaughter. Now, just for the sake of accuracy, and at the end of the series they say this, Lilia Bundles is not a blood relative to Madam C.J. Walker. Lilia Bundles is, since they put it in here, since they put it in at the end of episode 4, I'm going to say it, okay? This is not by any means an attack or anything like that. It's just stating facts because they stated it at the end of the series. Lilia Walker was the daughter of Madam C.J. Walker. She was the daughter from Madam C.J. Walker's, was it her second husband or first husband? One of them. She was married 3 times. But I think it was her first husband. But anyway, my point is that you see the young girl in the series. Her name is Fairy May, dark skin, long hair, beautiful sister. Lelia Bundles, Lelia Walker, who becomes Lelia Bundles, ends up adopting Fairy Mae. Okay, Fairy Mae is going to go on to Spelman College, and she's going to become president of the Walker Company in 1931. Fairy Mae. Fairy Mae marries twice and has 2 children, and she's going to have 3 grandchildren. Lilia Bundles, who wrote the book On Her Own Ground, is one of Fairy Mae's 3 grandchildren. Okay, so at the end of the 4th installment, and they're laying out some history about Madam C.J. Walker, things like this, that's talked about. Okay, so let's go back to this article. So Booker T. Washington was really initially resistant to Madam C.J. Walker speaking at his events, though, and he did dislike the cosmetic industry because, per Booker T. Washington biographer Lewis R. Harlan, Harlan, they, quote, fostered imitation of white beauty standards, end quote. Now, per Lilia Bundles and Harlan, Lewis R. Harlan, the author, in January 1912, Madam C.J. Walker heard of Booker T. Washington's Negro Farmers Conference at the Tuskegee Institute and personally visited Washington's home to ask if he could introduce her to the attendees. He turned her down, but Madam C.J. Walker persisted, and eventually Booker T. Washington allowed her to speak at a side venue called The Chapel, Chapel. Now, despite taking hair care to a bunch of farmers, Lilia Bundles wrote that the reaction was sufficiently positive that Booker T. Washington allowed her to market her products for the rest of the conference. Madam C.J. Walker expressed gratitude and even made a small donation to the school. Now, despite this positive interaction, Booker T. Washington was strangely non-committal when Madam C.J. Walker asked him later that year if she could then speak at his National Negro Business League convention. Okay? That's the one that you see depicted in Self-Made, the convention that you see depicted in Self-Made. That's the National Negro Business League. That was founded right around 1900 by Booker T. Washington. The Colored Merchants Association, which was a cooperative, and it was a cooperative to help African American grocery store owners better market their grocery stores to compete against the rise of the chain stores, the AMPs and the Kresge's, things like this. That comes about 1927, the Colored Merchants Association. Okay, if you read the book Collective Courage by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard, who I've interviewed in the past, this book deals with our deep, rich history of cooperative economics, the cooperatives, the co-ops. Okay, we have a deep, rich history that most people don't know dealing with that. And the co-ops were our strength because this is operating based upon principles we brought with us from Africa, principles of the cooperatives. And to have a successful cooperative, you have to cooperate. So when we have a breakdown and eradication of the cooperatives, that helps to break down the cooperation. So despite the positive interaction, Booker T. Washington was strangely non-committal when Madam C.J. Walker asked him later that year if she could speak at his National Negro Business League convention. when her friend George Knox, Knox, George Knox, stood up in the audience to ask if the audience would hear Madam C.J. Walker's remarkable story during a Q&A session, Booker T. Washington icily dismissed him by calling on another attendee. After Booker T. Washington called up several other men to present, all with smaller businesses than what Madam C.J. Walker had, Alilia Bundos, the author, Alilia Bundos noted Madam C.J. Walker stood up and addressed Washington from the audience. Quote, "Surely you are not going to shut the door in my face," end quote, she said. "I feel that I am in a business that is a credit to the womanhood of our race. I went into a business that is despised, that is criticized and talked about by everybody," end quote. She described how she came from the cotton fields of the South, became a washerwoman, a cook, and finally the head of her own company. Quote, "I am not ashamed of my humble beginning," end quote, Madam C.J. Walker said. Quote, "My object in life is not simple. My object in life is not simply to make money for myself, but to use a part of what I make in trying to help others," end quote. This is where self-made inserted Booker T. Washington's sexist accusations. But Alilia Bundos wrote that no recorded transcripts from that day, quote, "reveal Booker T. Washington's personal unspoken reaction," end quote, to Madam C.J. Walker's speech. Booker T. Washington did openly ignore her, though, calling on the next male presenter as if Madam C.J. Walker had not uttered a word. Now, Booker T. Washington's snubs and hot and cold attitude were undeniably ridiculous and ego-driven, but Madam C.J. Walker persisted in winning him over and gaining his endorsement. In July 1913, she invited Booker T. Washington to be her house guest for the dedication of a new Indianapolis YMCA, which both Booker T. Washington and Madam C.J. Walker donated money to. He surprisingly accepted, and Walker showed him every courtesy at her house. In return, Booker T. Washington praised Madam C.J. Walker to the YMCA audience, recognizing she was the largest donor at the event. She also donated $5,000 to the NAACP. Up until 1919, she was the largest donor to the NAACP. In the history of the NAACP, she donated $5,000 to the NAACP. Now, finally, at the Tuskegee Institute's 1913 National Negro Business League Convention, just a year after he spurned her, Booker T. Washington introduced Madam C.J. Walker to attendees as a quote striking example of the possibilities of Negro womanhood in the business world, end quote. Booker T. Washington must have begun to realize Madam C.J. Walker's money-making potential, as well as the symbolic and inspirational value of having a former washerwoman turned philanthropist support his school, Alilia Bundos theorized. Alilia Bundos went on to say, she in turn fully understood the advantages of having a connection with the man who controlled the editorial policies and purse strings of dozens of black newspapers. Ultimately, Madam C.J. Walker's relationship with Booker T. Washington shows exactly why she was a successful businesswoman. She was persistent and bold and never let a man's ego get in the way of her dreams. Read this article. See, this is like deep, deep history. Two iconic figures, Madam C.J. Walker and Booker T. Washington. Okay? And This is some deep history here. This is on March 20th, 2020, written by Gretchen Smail, S-M-A-I-L, for Bustle.com. Booker T. Washington and Madam C.J. Walker's feud in Self-Made was even more complicated. Okay, so check out this article. We'll post a link here. Also read the article from OprahMag.com. They go through the special mess. I'll do another broadcast dealing with this. One, they talk about Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Turmo Malone weren't such bitter rivals. Malone was a pioneer in the African-American hair care industry, and her successes were extremely underscored in the series. She also was not a light-skinned black woman, even though much of her and Walker's feud in the show was based upon their differing skin tones, a storyline that many felt was unnecessary. What is true, however, is that Madam C.J. Walker did work as a saleswoman for Annie Turnbo Malone, T-U-R-N-B-O, before branching out and creating her own successful business. But that connection did not drive either woman's success. For example, Annie Turnbo Malone definitely did not follow Madam C.J. Walker across the country in an effort to stifle her business, as depicted in the series. Alilia Bundles says, quote, "They were competitors, but for me that competition is not the centerpiece of Madam Walker's life. I think it becomes the centerpiece of Self-Made in order to create tension. I think the writers, if you interview them, would say this is a composite character. It's not necessarily Annie Malone. In reality, she did not move to Indianapolis, and it wasn't as an in-your-face kind of competition." Okay, so it's loosely based on Annie Turmo Malone, but it's not 100% based. There's a lot of fiction interwoven into this series. The other thing that was false in here, or very little evidence to support, is that Alilia Walker, the daughter of Madam C.J. Walker, was gay or queer. She and her daughter disagreed over Lilia's love life, but it's not what you think. So in the show, in the series, Walker is frustrated that her daughter Lilia, played by Tiffany Haddish. Now, Tiffany Haddish did a great job. In general, I like Tiffany Haddish. It's good to see her play a role where she's not doing a whole bunch of cussing and just being vulgar and just acting stupid, things like this. You know, because I think she has a lot of potential. I hope she doesn't get typecasted. But in the show, Madam C.J. Walker is frustrated with her daughter, Alilia, because of her disinterest in starting a family and her reluctance to take the inheritance of Madam C.J. Walker's hair care legacy seriously. It also insinuated that Alilia was queer in that her mother disapproved. But Alila Bundles says there's very little evidence to support that plot line. However, Bundles says there was real drama that she would have loved to see on the show, and it had to do with Alilia's last two husbands, Wiley Wilson and James Arthur Kennedy. She said, quote, "They were both doctors and they were both very handsome," she says, "and one was a bad boy and one was a good guy. And of course, she was in love with the bad boy, Wilson, and her mother knew the bad boy was a bad boy and really favored the good guy, Kennedy." All right, let's see here. Yeah, it was with her first husband, Moses McWilliams. Madam C.J. Walker married her first husband when she was 14 years old, and it was with her first husband that she had her child, her only child, Alilia Walker. Yeah, that was her first husband, Moses McWilliams. Okay, so very quickly here, let me look at some of my notes. So I talked about slavery being a backdrop here, right? And there was one character played by Garrett Morris, who was on the first season of Saturday Night Live, veteran actor. Saw him in Cooley High. He was Uncle Junior on the Jamie Foxx show. He plays the role of Charles Joseph Walker's father. Okay, his name is Cleophas. And he's a former slave. And he talks about slavery and being on Master Walker's plantation, because this is where they get the Walker name from. That was the name of their slave owner. So it's like seeing a collision of two different worlds. You see former slaves who are still alive talking about what it was like to be a slave on a plantation while working in a business empire owned by a black woman. This is all right there taking place real time. And it appears, because I went and looked at Charles Joseph Walker's bio, he was born in 1851, so it appears he was a former slave also, because there was a scene where Cleophas, played by Garrett Morris, asked him, "Do you remember Master Walker?" And he told him, "Well, you were probably too young to remember Master Walker." But he talks about being on the plantation, and he said there was a scene where he said that Cleophas said to Charles, his son, "You keep calling this our business," meaning you and Sarah Breedlove. "She keeps calling it her business." And he said, "You remember Master Walker?" He said, "You were too young to remember Master Walker." He said, on the plantation, Master Walker kept talking about our crops and our this and all that, when really he meant it was his. And he told his son something to the effect of, "You have to make your own money." Okay, he said, and he told him, "Don't make your money the same place where you get your honey." Right? But you have this dynamic where you have former slaves still alive, and at the same time you have a black business empire that exists. Now, the fictitious character of Addie Monroe, her mother's a former slave. Her mother was raped. It's alluded to in the series. Her mother was raped by the slave master, and she said, and there's a scene. She's talking to her mother on the telephone, and her mother talks about how her daughter it has light skin and good hair, and she says the master cursed me with the daughter. But she says something to the effect, "You're going to be all right because you have light skin and good hair," things like this. So we see slavery as a subtext in this series and the legacy of slavery. Okay? Let's see here. So Cleophas was a former slave. He talks to Charles Joseph Walker. We see door-to-door selling depicted. Sarah wanted to create a company she could pass on to her daughter, create a legacy. Lelia said, "Hair is your dream, but not mine." Her daughter said, "Hair is your dream, but not my dream." Sarah said, "Don't gamble your future away on a man. Make your own money." Lelia was a college graduate. So we see, Madam C.J. Walker was born in 1867. She was born 2 years after slavery ends. She was a washerwoman and a cook. But she was able to send her daughter to college. And she's able to create a business empire. And she was born 2 years after slavery ended. I mean, this is just an amazing story. So early on, when she starts her business, things move slowly. Her husband CJ gave her 2 weeks to turn things around. And CJ, as the pig, now CJ is going to end up cheating on her. The woman he cheats with her, the woman he cheats with on Madam C.J. Walker. She was a real woman. That was her name. Her name was Dora, I think it was. and they're going to end up getting married. He divorces her, and one source said 1910. I think maybe it went to court in 1910 and there was a delay, but another source I see 1912. Maybe it wasn't finalized in 1912. Okay, but he's going to end up marrying Dora, who he cheated with. They're going to start a type of Walker hair company, and Dora's going to try to pass herself off as Madam C.J. Walker, because the C.J. Walker comes from Charles Joseph Walker. Okay, but that's short-lived. That's not successful at all. It's what I notice is that they interject various parts of history into this series as in passing. So there's one scene where they're going to church. Well, actually, before that scene, they're sitting around, and it looks like it's a telegram, and it's printing out on a piece of paper. So they must not have radios, because they're reading the teletype, and it's about the Jack Johnson fight that's taking place. Okay? Because radios existed at that time, but I don't know why they didn't have one, so I don't know what's going on with that. Because radios existed at that time. But then there's a scene, they're going to church, and they say 26 Negroes were killed because Jack Johnson won the fight. And then Charles Joseph Walker says there were riots in one character says there were riots in 7 cities. Another character says, I heard there were riots in 10 cities. But there was a rebellion against African Americans when Jack Johnson won the heavyweight championship, and when he would win his fights and beat up white men. There were lynchings that took place. There were white men trying to because we were ecstatic, just like when Joe Louis won the heavyweight championship. But we were ecstatic when Jack Johnson won, and this was an effort to terrorize African Americans and try to keep us in our place. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so that's enough for now. We'll wrap it up there. I'll do another broadcast. We'll go deep into this, because I have 4 pages of notes. All right, let's quickly look at some of your comments here. How's everybody doing? This is part 2 of the African History Network show, because my Zoom broadcast was interrupted for the first part. So I was giving some comments about the series on Netflix, Self-Made. I saw the entire thing, watched it twice. So even though there's some fiction in it and things like this, I think overall it's good for people to see it. There's so many different aspects of this and so much history incorporated into this that we then need to go research and teach to our children. Okay? All right, so look, hey everybody, we're going to get out of here. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Turn on notifications so you know when I go live. Follow me on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Turn on notifications so you know when I go live. All of my DVD lectures are available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Also, if you want to donate to the African History Network, you can do it through Cash App, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, or through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, paypal.me/TheAHNShow. If you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And we're on every Sunday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. to Superstation WFDF in Detroit. We broadcast all over the country. So remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. I'll talk to you next week. Peace.